The following is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network.
G'day world, this is the Sniper of the Skies, Robbie Eagles, and you are listening to Keeping It Strong Style.
Yo, this is Rich Latta from One Nation Radio. This is brought to you by the Social Suplex Podcast Network. We present to you the Ace of Podcasts, Keeping It Strong Style. Let's go. It's the Ace of Podcasts, Keeping It Strong Style. Covering New Japan, they ready to hold it down. Jeremy Donovan and the young boy Josh. Come and hit a job out and bury all the frauds. From the Tokyo Dome over to the G1. Social Suplex is the network where we can get it done. I'ma chill and let them have it, cause this is just an intro. Keeping the strong style, 6 stars from the get-go, boy. Yeah, from Tampa Bay to the Tokyo Dome, this is Keeping It Strong Style with your hosts, Jeremy Donovan and the young boy Joshua Smith. And thank you for listening.
Welcome to Keeping It Strong Style, the Ace of Podcasts on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. Jeremy Donovan here with the young boy Josh Smith and Josh from We Work Stiff. On today's show, we'll review the conclusion of World Tag League and cover all latest news in the world of New Japan Pro Wrestling. Please support our show by subscribing and following the Social Suplex Podcast Network or Keeping It Strong Style on the podcast app of your choice and leaving a rating and review. You can also get all the network's podcasts over at socialsuplex.com. Check out our Pro Wrestling Tees store, prowrestlingtees.com/socialsuplex. That's where you can get your official Keeping It Strong Style t-shirt. If you enjoy this podcast, please consider making a one-time or monthly donation by visiting socialsuplex.com/donate and click on the donate button under the Keeping It Strong Style logo. Josh, Stiff Josh, welcome to the show, man.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I very much appreciate the invite.
Yeah, man.
Jeremy didn't ask my approval. He just threw the invite out and then told me about it.
I've heard you guys mention every now and again our show in relation to whether the Robbie interview or something like that. So I do appreciate the shout outs in the past. But yeah, now unfortunately I'm here now. So that's it.
Yeah, I never thought I'd have another Josh who covers New Japan on the show with me.
Yeah, right. Our worlds are colliding at this point. The confusion of multiple names. I thought we were over that now in pro wrestling. Haven't we just gotten past that?
Yeah, Vince would not like this show.
Vince wouldn't like this show for a lot of reasons.
Yeah, so to avoid any confusion for me, I'm gonna call We Work Stiff Josh, and then young boy. So
why don't you just call him? I mean, you can call him Stiff Josh. That sounds a bit objectifying, but you could just call him Josh. You usually just refer to me as young boy anyway. It's not like I'm going to get confused about who you're talking about.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see how it goes.
Gotta get that moniker over, brother.
Once again, one of my suggestions is shot down by the boss. Okay.
Hey, I'm just trying to get his branding out there. They have the whole, the Stiff fan club, the Stiffy awards, Got to make sure people know what we're talking with here,
Thank you.
Yeah.
Appreciate it. Very much appreciate it. Shouting out the Stiffies. Thank you very much for that. Yeah.
This is, before we jump into questions, a couple things. Number one, this is the first time we've had lots of people that cover Puroresu as a whole on the show, but we've never had an exclusive New Japan podcaster from a different show come onto our show. So this is actually a first time ever. Second thing, I think this is the latest we've stayed up to do other people's podcasts pretty late, but we've never stayed up this late to do our own show to accommodate an outside guest. So this is a historic show all around.
Historic crossover.
Yeah, building me up that's great. So I could be, if I fail, then we all know it's a monumental failure here. But no, I do appreciate it, obviously. I do appreciate the fact that it's an Australian podcast. I think the reason it works in that sense of you sort of inviting, another exclusive New Japan podcast across is that I think that, there's space in the landscape for other shows if they are covering it in, I think, their own ways. And I think that's kind of what we tried to do when we sort of built the show was like, we're not here to replicate what's already in the space. It's like, let's complement it. And I think that's from the feedback I get from listeners that listen to our show and your show, that tends to be the feedback is like it's two sides of the same coin, you know?
Yeah, like we were talking before we recorded, there's been so many listeners that are like, man, yeah, our worlds are collided. I listen to both these shows. It's pretty cool that you guys are, teaming up together. So yeah, it's very interesting to see how, different podcasts kind of work within the same space.
I listen to the Stiff Boys so that I can gather ideas from them to try and beat them. So I try to make this show much more story centric based on how they do it.
Excellent. You're our Tony Khan. Is that how it's working?
Tony Khan, I love Perezu.
Yeah, this is actually like a recruitment effort to bring you over to Social Suplex.
I would have assumed that, but when I turned up, Young Boy wasn't wearing a scarf, so I assumed, okay, no, we're safe. But if the scarf was out, then maybe I'd be concerned it's been recruited.
Oh man. All right, so Stiff Josh, anytime we have new guests on the show, we ask them kind of their origins of how they got into New Japan. So first, when did you start watching New Japan?
So I think I started around 2014. I had been a wrestling fan as a kid. I had followed WCW down here in Australia. That was like the brand that we got. We used to get the Nitro shows back in the mid-90s. I think the first wrestling show I ever got when I was a kid, I picked up Super Brawl 2. It was like Liger Pillman. I got it because Sting was on the cover, but that was the first wrestling match I ever saw was Liger and Pillman.
Wow.
I'm like, this is what wrestling is? I was like, not all the time. But so that was kind of my introduction to wrestling, and I was a fan of WCW. I was always a fan of them. And so when obviously they got sort of subsumed by the by WWF, I stayed with that until Austin left because I had known the Hollywood Blondes and stuff. And so I stopped watching wrestling from 2003. And I went away for like a decade, and I was always checking in with like TNA. I sort of check in with the Challenger brand. I was like, I just want something. I want an alternative that if WCW was this kind of like Southern, sincere pro wrestling to the point of corniness, but they were always a different type of pro wrestling. It wasn't sort of these over the top sort of character driven things, or this larger than life kind of vision. It was like, just real in the sense of how it was presented, even to the point of like embarrassing at times, but Southern style pro wrestling, I guess I was kind of brought up on. And so then around like 2013, 2014, I started like getting nostalgic for wrestling, started watching like documentaries. I think I stumbled across Wrestler Road Diaries. I think that was something I spotted. And as it sort of went along, I ended up finding the Devitt documentary. And that was kind of like a pretty big one. I was like, oh, that's really interesting. I've been following TNA for a bit. I knew of AJ Styles. And then I kind of moved across about 2014, 2015. And I did that Wrestle Kingdom 9, I think, on the Flips app or something like that. I think that was the most accessible sort of access.
Yeah.
I got that. And then I signed up to World, a month or two later or something when it was, whenever that World launch was happening. And yeah, I've been a fan ever since.
Nice.
You mentioned you watched WCW in Australia. I thought you might meant like Jim Barnett's WCW.
No, I'm not that old. I'm not that old, mate. But no, it was, like I said, it was the only thing accessible at the time. Like we didn't have TV like you have in the States. So we got it ironically, we got it 6:05 on a Saturday. Was WCW Nitro. It took from Monday to Saturday to get it. So it took a little bit of time, but that was sort of my introduction to pro wrestling.
Nice. So who's your favorite New Japan wrestler?
Despy, El Desperado. It's not even a discussion. I mean, I've had many. I think when I first started, like Nakamura was kind of my guy. I mean, my story of New Japan is like many. It's a story of heartbreak, of like every guy I like eventually leaves. But I found Desperado kind of ties in, a bit to the origin of the show, and the direction that we ended up taking was just, really connecting to that character. I find him an infinitely fascinating guy. I think he's the most, he's the purest pro wrestler in the sense that he can tell you everything just from physical charisma and physical, like there's not too many better that's able to communicate their feelings without using their face. So I love him, really. I think he's great.
Yeah, it is cool. Like with him being a mass wrestler, just how much he does emote and how much you can, even his selling is like so great. Like you can tell what pain he's in, even though he is, fully covered.
Yeah.
He's
great.
Last question here. What's your favorite New Japan match?
It's interesting. I mean, it just came. We just had the anniversary of it. It was the Boss J final, Hiromu and Despy, the unmasking match.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
To me, like the pandemic era was tough. It was tough. Like let's not kid ourselves. And here in Australia, we were very strict in terms of lockdowns and such. So we were in our house for a long period of time during the, not to the extent of Japan, but we weren't far behind in terms of the level of sort of stringency around that. And so, I sort of turned to New Japan really strongly during that period. And that match in particular felt like it was that first glimmer of hope that there was something on the horizon, because like you weren't allowed to cheer, but that crowd could not help themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And it's sort of a lot of that match is emblematic of what I like about New Japan Pro Wrestling. What I kind of like about the community that's around there is like, I watched it, thought it was awesome. I love the story of, Hiromu trying to reveal the true identity of Despy, who he really is, that kind of vision. And so I thought I was engaging at that level, but I had on Twitter, which, results may vary from your engagement on Twitter, but like I often find that I find really interesting insights from people that I wouldn't otherwise be engaging with. And especially during COVID, where you just lock down, not talking to anyone, I'm like talking to my wall. So I'll take anybody at this point. But there's like some really interested fans were saying like, I had a trans fan talk to me about how they looked at the identity component of that and how that was about identity affirmation. And it was like unlocking something in my head that I hadn't seen before, like the idea that Despy was always El Desperado. That is who he is. That is who he's become. And that Hiromu was learning the empathy to identify that was the character. And when he took his mask off, he's still Despy. Like, it's still the same guy. And that Hiromu accepted that. I was like, I would have never read that. But now that I have that, I'm like, I choose to accept that reading, right?
Yeah.
And I think that that's kind of what I like about the space, is that there's opportunities to go deep if you want. If you don't, that's fine. You can just enjoy the banger, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, for me, that's kind of emblematic of what modern New Japan is,
Nice. All right, before we jump into World Tag League, we did have a question from mutual listener, Rambone Slam Pig. He says, I feel like Batman and Superman are teaming up this week. I'm a big fan of both podcasts. Can you guys talk about how the different approaches to engaging with NJPW complement each other?
Ooh, that's if you know me, then there's fear that I'll spend an exorbitant amount of time trying to determine who's Batman and who's Superman. But no, that's a lovely sort of insight. I think, I don't know, from my perspective, I recognize coming in, I mean, we had started a podcast like before the pandemic, about 2017, 2018, and it never really took. Like we were, Dave and I were kind of just, and Red at the time, we were just kind of trying to, I said, grow interest in New Japan, because we'd like discovered this thing like an oasis in the desert. Like, if you're a wrestling fan that might be disillusioned with Western pro wrestling, whatever, here's an option. And we just couldn't find the sort of the angle to take to get that goal. And so obviously the pandemic happened and lots of things happened, and we sort of went away from it. And I listened obviously to you guys. I'm very much a fan of that kind of any long form discussion about New Japan. I want to engage in that sort of content. And I would listen to it and go like, yeah, okay, cool. That's one way to engage here from I talk about this all the time, whether it's the Okada Shorts boys who we're, kind of friendly with as well, internet friends as we call them. Like, there's different ways to do this. And I just viewed it as like, this is how I view it. This is how Dave views it. This is how we read New Japan regardless. We're not trying to pretend to put on this is how we read it. And it's complementary just by the nature of it. It's not like we're trying to be different. It's just how we see it. And I would assume it's the same for you. It's like, that's how you're reading it. So, if we were the same, I think we would have the same results we had in the past. It's like we just gave up trying to be a podcast that the structure of a podcast is supposed to be. And we just went to, this is how we see it, and we're going to go all in on that. And I find that, for people, our listeners at our show are telling us that they listen to you guys and they listen to us. I mean, that's, to me, is an indication that I think we're both doing something right. And we're providing a full view of the product, I guess, is kind of the way I look at it. So yeah, I don't view it as a challenger brand coming in to try to, because I just think they're just different approaches, and there will be crossover, and there will be audience members that I'm sure listening to your show today that are going to be like yelling at their radio or whatever, their speaker, being like, oh, because it's just a different view. But there will be people that cross over, and that's awesome.
Yeah.
One thing that I hate that you guys do, and it's a jealousy aspect, is, me and Jeremy, we have other interests outside of New Japan. Rarely does it make its way into the show because we just kind of hone in on the nerdy aspects of our, insular star ratings and reviews and blah, blah, blah. But like, I'm a huge cinephile. I don't even talk about it very often here on the show. And then you guys have the idea and the audacity to, have these incredible, parody posters that you guys post for your episodes. And I'm like, why the fuck didn't we ever think to, and now we can't do it because if we do it, we're copying you guys. And I just hate it. And I don't like it at all, but it's pretty freaking awesome.
Appreciate that. There's a compliment couched in there somewhere. I should. No, I think that's, end of the day, like, look, we've sort of run headfirst into all of the tropes of like cinema, or storytelling. It's like, these are things that you just don't want to be associated with in terms of the pro wrestling discourse. But I think we're just like, this is who we are. This is how we read the stuff. This is how we find a relationship to things, movies, and understanding the medium, and not trying to compare it to film, but using it as a parallel to help us understand. I mean, that's just the nature of how we would talk about anything. So it just has led to film being a sort of a core tenet to our approach to talking about it. But yeah, I think, as I said, man, I think at the end of the day, like, all of those influences are going to come into your discourse regardless. It's just, we've just kind of put them up front and sort of said, okay, hope for the best,
Mm-hmm. Well, I love them, and I'm jealous of them for sure.
Thanks, mate.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, our approach to the show, like, it just kind of like happened and grew. Because I remember like the first episode we recorded, like, the run sheet was like not even like how it is now. I mean, we had some topics and we were just kind of talking, and I think over time it just kind of evolved.
Yeah, we had a totally different idea about what this was all going to be and how it was going to go. But, I think with us, we just kind of like forged ahead because we started with like 30 people. We're like, maybe someone will listen, maybe they won't. I don't know.
Well, we were so excited to get like those first 30 downloads. Like, all right,
we're like, oh,
we're
shit.
We're getting over. Oh man, yeah. And then the thing that really helped us was Purocast shutting down for like a few weeks. And
thanks, Damon. Thanks, boys. Yeah, they shut down, and we were like, "Oh, our numbers went up. This is incredible. We're going to be number one in the space."
But I must admit, I find your show to be very professional in the sense you've got a real distinct structure and pattern. And I feel very kind of like, oh, I get a little inside note. So like I got the run sheet, like, oh, look at this. Like this is like I'm seeing how the sausage is made across here. But
I thought about that actually. I was like, I don't know if we should send him one of these.
Yeah, no, don't worry. There's no danger of us sticking to a run sheet. But it is really, as I said, I think it's consistency. You've been around for a long time. I think it's respected as voices in the space because, like, at the end of the day, we love this thing and we want to talk about it, and it can lead to critical discourse. I'm all for that. I'm no dramas with that because it's all from a place of the people that are stuck through for this long, going through the highs and the lows of the transitioning fandom that's going across. If you're still here, you're still doing it. I think it's a sign that you care about it. I think you fans will invest in people that care.
Yeah, definitely.
One thing before we jump into the review here, I do need to put a quick plug in. This week, I will be guest hosting on the Chris Things Wrestling with Art podcast. I will be joining him to review the match of the week, and we will be discussing Toshiaki Kawada defending the All Japan Pro Wrestling Triple Crown title against one Don the Predator Fry. So that will be recorded tomorrow. I don't know when it comes out, but it will be here on this network. So definitely check that out. Just want to put that plug in because, get these numbers up, get these downloads.
Yeah. All right, guys, let's jump into World Tag League. So we'll be talking about A block final night, B block final night, semifinals, and finals. We can kind of just run through the results of the undercards and kind of focus more on the tournament matches. So we're picking up night 13, A block final night. This was December 6th. Show opened up, we had Oscar Loewe defeating Shoma Kato, 4 minutes and 40 seconds. We had the Bullet Club team of Bad Luck Fale, Jack Bonza, and Taiji Ishimori defeating Minoru Suzuki, Ryusuke Taguchi, and Yuji Nagata, 8 minutes, 16 seconds. Then we had Bushi Shingo and Tsuji and Xander Khan Jr. defeating Atlantis Jr., Soberano Jr., Tiger Mask, and Hanma. Then Monster Sauce teamed up with Master Wato to defeat ELP, Hikuleo, and Jado. And then the Chaos team of Goto, Okada, and Yoshihashi teaming up with Hiroshi Tanahashi. They defeated Doki, Sanada, Taichi, and Yuya Uemura. So this brought us to the A block matches for this night. So first we had Gates of Agony defeating Kaito Kiyomiya and Ryohei Oiwa in 11 minutes 34 seconds. So both these teams were out at this point. This was more of just kind of a fight for pride, fight to get some more points on the board here.
Yeah. I mean, I think when we're sort of going into this point, I was like, yeah, this is just another showcase, I guess, for these teams. Who's going to be the outsider in this space that's going to be booked the strongest? I heard you last week talking about the Gates of Agony and their sort of positioning in this tournament. I think as we sort of go along, there's sort of discussion points to be had in regards to them. But I think at the end of the day, like this is just an opportunity to sort of see them in this space. Another opportunity for them to showcase their meaty men kind of approach. And yeah, you know a team, that kind of keeps the running sort of direction for that group. But yeah, I think, that group with Oiwa and Kiyomiya, I think Oiwa being able to be the guy that's there to take the falls and sort of insulate Kaito to some extent was a benefit in this tournament. And yeah, I think, as I said, pretty much whatever I was thinking about this match became quite redundant or overshadowed pretty soon after it, as the card went on. So it's one of those ones where it's like, yep, just giving them a performance on the end to, the gold watch kind of match. Here you go.
One has to wonder what Swerve has to say to these boys when they get back to the U.S. And one has to wonder what kind of hell Kano is going to give to Kiyomiya once he gets back into the green mat. So that's all I'm going to put it there. 2 sides of the same coin, 4 points each, 2 wins, failures. All right. Shimmy Han. Booking these boys like losers to restore the feeling. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Yeah. And to some extent, you're right. There's a bit of that where, especially Gates of Agony, I think it's like, what purpose do they serve? I guess that's the question when you sort of see their results. But if you look at it, it's like, okay, are they like in the broader landscape, where do they rank in the AEW Ring of Honor tag team hierarchy?
Right.
Are they commensurate with where Gabe Kidd and Alex Coughlin were last year? Perhaps. Mm-hmm. And the idea for the classic New Japan trophy booking model is, okay, your first tournament, you're coming in, you're not necessarily seen as a dominant team outside. They don't give them a lot, let's be real, but they get the match later with the Dream Team, I guess. But yeah, I think I was surprised by the result, but I think fundamentally they're there to serve a purpose, provide a diverse team that otherwise you can't really get in New Japan proper, I guess. But I was surprised by the overall results, to be fair. But I think in particular the Kaito Oiwa team, I think they'd certainly outperform their record. But people just look at the records and go, disappointing.
Yeah, I think obviously this was more about, actually for both teams, about experience. Obviously Oiwa still on excursion. This was, him getting some experience in his first kind of league tournament. And then, yeah, Gates of Agony, they, to my knowledge, haven't really competed internationally. So it was kind of their first big, international tour on a major stage. So getting some experience for them. And so, yeah, The records don't look great, but I think they've gained something with experience here, and they end the tournament with a win. So kind of like we were joking about last week, on Dynamite, they can show the clip of the last win and be like, yeah, they were over here in World Tag League being dominant.
Bro, they're not going to show a clip of the World Tag League on Dynamite.
Yeah. Odds of mentioning the Tag League beyond this point, like you get Nana sort of. They're in Japan, people. Yeah.
Maybe at Ring of Honor Final Battle when they do the pre-match video package, if there is one, there might be a 1 second clip of them hitting the Gates of Agony or whatever their finish is. That's about it. That's all you're getting. Some B-roll. That's about all you're getting here. So
yeah.
So moving on to the next match, I think we're going to be talking about this one for a while now. So we had the House of Torture, Evil and Yujiro Takahashi defeating Ren Narita and Shota Umino 9 minutes and 38 seconds. And of course, the big talking point here, the turn of Ren Narita. We had the documentary, all these interviews, the build, the strong style versus Team Nagata, the build of these guys becoming teammates and partners, and we learned about their backstory. And we mentioned last week, Umino, he ate 3 falls, he got the 3 wins, so everything was kind of make or break on him. And Ren Narita saying, we're not done yet. There's gonna be a lot more to come with us, something like that. And so, yeah. So, Stiff Josh, what did you think about the turn and how it all played out?
Okay, here we go. Well, the angle itself, the turn, I loved. I loved the moment of the turn. I mean, once they lost to TMDK and the way that match was sort of constructed, last week we were supposed to record an episode of our podcast, but Dave got COVID. And so we weren't able to record. And so I went to Twitter machine pretty quickly and be like, I want to get these takes off quick because as soon as that sort of direction was becoming quite apparent, as you were mentioning last week, and we were talking about it as well, that Umino being the one involved in all the consequence was related to Shota. It was even, I think Young Boy mentioned it last week, the Owen Hart kind of Bret Hart. I mean, that was the same way. It's like, you're just too damn selfish, Shota. And you kind of felt like then you saw the House of Torture on that final night. And before the tournament, when we're looking at it, we're like, oh, maybe that's the shenanigans I have to overcome, or they're going to get thwarted and they're going to miss out. And that's the tag story. But once it became apparent they couldn't make it, then there was like, alarm bells started sounding off that this angle alert, it became quite apparent. So going into there, I had this kind of like, is it going to happen? And then as I said, as it starts, they get the Ren sort of getting sidelined to begin with, and we're going with that direction. And I thought the angle in terms of the execution for it was perfect for me. And I think it tells, like, I know people are going to be upset about the House of Torture of it all. Everyone's quick to get off their hot takes, literally. But for me, the vision of the way they did the turn, like the way I engage with this is I try my best to avoid the outside discourse and the cloud that envelops that, and just sort of say, okay, what are they doing here? What's happening here? And it's like, okay, he does this turn. It's kind of like, people make the Kenta comparison, but it's like the Azuka and Tenzon kind of vision. I saw that awesome parallel someone did on Twitter. That was great. Of like the drop down, go out, sit down, watch it happen. And what I loved about it was it sort of told us a lot about what House of Torture is, where it's like Shota's like holding his own. They're pretty ineffectual when they're trying to stop him, because Ren's sitting out there watching it as these two guys are now not being able, Evil and Yujiro, shock horror, aren't able to subdue, the fiery underdog babyface that is Shota Umino. And Ren has to get involved. He has to come in. He has to choke him out. I think that tells you a lot about the positioning of House of Torture and where Ren could see himself in there. It's like they're telling us House of Torture with Evil and Yujiro isn't very effectual. They need Ren Narita. And so I was like, okay, will they go off that? Who knows? The history of House of Torture is, paved with, it's not ideal, but I choose to believe, that's where I'm at, that this will help Ren in terms of elevating him and giving him something, that he otherwise didn't have. And I feel like, I don't know if you felt the same way, but I'm watching it and I felt like in the 14 seconds that he choked him out and had like 3 different facial expressions, put the shirt on, it was like he completely transformed. It was like every criticism I've had of Ren Narita just went away in that moment. And then, of course, we were enveloped by the discourse and people saying it's the worst decision. His career is done. He's over. It's like, well, as opposed to what? The 4.5-star Matt Classics he was having in the lead up? Like, where was he penciled to be? So I'm like, I'm not as down on House of Torture as other people. I get that their role, and I know that people will say, their career's done. But it's like, okay, well, didn't House of Torture make? We all bemoaned it. They made the finals of the Super Junior tags, and Evil made the semifinals of the G1. Like, regardless of if we like it or we don't like it, they are getting positioned in key spots. So that's the spot that Ren enters, and at its core, at the basis of this turn, he became the biggest babyface for me because he means that Yujiro is probably never going to be in a tournament again. So I'm like, this is incredible. Great job, Ren. So yeah, I'm not down on it, but I'm happy to have the discussion around it for sure.
Yeah, I do think it's a multifaceted, sort of issue, and it's very much of the ilk of the old adage, let's see how it plays out. The WWE fans love to throw that around, but the thing is sometimes there is truth to that. Sometimes you do have to have some patience to see how a planned angle or storyline plays out, and sometimes it sucks and sometimes it's great, sometimes it's in between. I like you, Stiff Josh, and I'm going to start saying Stiff Josh too because I think it's hilarious. I too really enjoyed the actual angle itself. Like, it became very apparent once the House of Torture came down and hit Narita in the stomach, and then he was selling
like he was dead.
Like he was dead, and I'm like, did they even hit this man? Like, because later he turns, and I'm like, did they? Maybe it was fake, and then I had to remind myself, like, all of this is fake. Like, of course they didn't really hit him, but in kayfabe, did they really hit him, or were they pantomiming? I don't know, but either way, he was indisposed on the outside while Shota Umino had to fight off those guys. It was done really, really, really well, and then ultimately, Ren Narita, like you mentioned, had to come in and basically save the House of Torture from a fiery Shota Umino. One thing I don't like, and I mean, this is just my own personal pet peeve, it's not like something that other people will care about. I don't like the X Factor as a move. I've never fucking liked that move. I just think when I see it, I think of Tori, Kane's girlfriend.
Yeah. I tell you, man, I'm here for meta level shithousery. Like, the idea that the House of Torture has been in the West have been compared to getting like X-Pac heat, go away heat. Yeah. And the fact that he's now adopted the X Factor, and he's even in the back calling himself Sold Out with a U. It's like, was he watching Sold Out 97? He saw 6 and Eddie Guerrero. It's like, that's it. I've seen the light.
I didn't even think of that.
Is he the 6th member of House of Torture now?
Is he the 6th member?
Yeah, perfect. He's in California for a long time.
What the hell? Anyways. Oh. So, a lot of people probably saw this angle coming a lot sooner than I think I did. But we kind of alluded to it last week, and then here it was. And for people that don't like it, I'm not going to sit here and try to change your mind. I get why people don't like it. House of Torture sucks. They have sucked for a long time. And even when there have been good angles and turns involving them, it always devolves into bullshit, right? So, I mean, you got plenty of evidence to point to say that is how this will also turn out. And maybe that's the case. With Gato's booking this year, who knows? I mean, I don't have high hopes. But at the same time, Ren Narita still Ren Narita. And, there were those people out there complaining about him being quote unquote boring. As soon as I saw this, I was like, well, I hope you guys are glad, because your complaining got this man into the House of Torture. I hope you guys are happy. He's too much like like Shibata. All right, well, let's turn him into evil. But there is a chance because the angle was done really well, and the feud between him and Umino is very hot right now. The next night, he came out and attacked Umino in the middle of the match with a chair. And then, they were brawling the night after that. So there is a lot of heat between those guys. And this could hypothetically be something that could reinvigorate House of Torture as a whole. I do think it's interesting how in the booking they have taken all these young generation guys and basically put them in different units all throughout the company. But they're all secondary guys, whether that's Yumura, Tsuji, Gabe Kidd, and now you're seeing it here with Narita. I am wondering where we go with this long term. And I'm hoping that I'm hoping that even if we do see Narita, lean into the shit hill gimmick that inevitably he's going to because it's House of Torture, that he can bring enough of his style of wrestling and athleticism and not completely throw that to the wayside, that maybe it could make House of Torture more interesting and bearable, because this angle was hot. The angle was really, really good. And every now and again, I get my hopes up with House of Torture, but inevitably it always devolves back into what I hate about them.
Yeah. And, for me, I got spoiled on the angle before it happened. So I just saw all right, Narita's in House of Torture. So my initial reaction, kind of like our friend Rich Latta, his question, he said, how did you feel when you saw Gato ended Ren Narita's career? My initial reaction was okay, here we go. Narita's in House of Torture. This sucks. And then I actually watched the show and I watched the angle, and I agree. I thought the angle was very well done. Just the subtleness of Narita barely getting hit, being out for a long time, and then coming in, choking Umino out, like you mentioned, sitting down and watching the beating, and then putting the shirt on, and doing their version of the Too Sweet, the cigar thing, whatever they do. I thought it was
not a cigar, Jeremy.
Or whatever it is, whatever they're smoking on. But yeah, I thought it was very well done. This will be an angle of the year, consideration for next year's award for our grading period. Thought it was really great done. And yeah, like you guys mentioned, people were complaining, Narita's so bland, he's boring, he's a Shibata knockoff. And, we were even talking last year he had a big singles match in the Dome against Zack Sabre, and now he's nowhere to be found on the Dome card. And the year before he faced Shibata in that exhibition match. And so it kind of seemed like his stock was dropping, but now you have this whole heel turn. I think, Young Boy and I have said from the time we first saw Narita in a lot of those Young Lion Cups and Young Lion matches, this guy looks like he's going to be a heel. Look at his face, look at his mannerisms. He's going to be a great heel. And so I think the turn makes sense. I think him being a heel makes sense. And this does kind of add some heat to this Umino Narita feud. And, hopefully they will have a singles match at the Tokyo Dome. My one concern is this going to be another show situation? Show, but before Show turned, he was a top prospect. He was having all these great junior matches. He was having the great matches against Shingo, and people were like, yeah, Show is the next ace of the junior division. Let's get him up to heavyweight, get him in G1s. And, there seemed to be a really bright future, and everybody liked Show over Yo, and Show Michaels, Marty Jannetty. And then he joined House of Torture, and he just has not been the same. So I'm hoping, like you mentioned, Young Boy, that even though we know the shenanigans are going to be there, that the great wrestling from Ren Narita will still come through and shine. And I do think there is money to kind of having these guys on the opposite side of the fence.
Yep, I agree. I also think the last two turns with Uncle Nobu, with Kanemaru doing the turn as well, I think there's indications that, you saw the way, I personally felt like if you compared the tag league runs, that Sho and Kanemaru's junior tag league run was the shenanigans were there, but they were toned down relative to what we've seen in the past, especially compared to what we saw in the heavy tag. I thought that, it's pretty clear they knew that they needed more than two guys when Yujiro was there. So I have a little bit of hope. And I guess with Sho, I was like everyone as well. I thought this guy was like, it was like mini Shingo kind of vision. But I also think that there's something about Sho. Say what you want about the man. I think he really likes. I think he really likes this positioning. He goes all in, like shenanigans. It's literally shenanigans. He has his own way, his own approach. His King of Pro Wrestling stipulations were singular. So there, it feels like I understand we're losing the great matches, and I get that, but who knows where that will lead? Perhaps, I don't know, and maybe he'll never be what people want him to be. But I think with House of Torture, there's some level of investment from domestic fans there at least. There has to be something in that space because it seems like they find themselves in key spots. So whether we like it or not, it feels like. I'm with you, young boy, in terms of I hope that Ren Narita is more transformative to the House of Torture than the House of Torture are to him.
Yeah, and I think, another great point that you had mentioned, Stiff Josh, which kind of answers MJSPR's question, which you believe is actually a step up for Narita. Like you mentioned, House of Torture is always kind of positioned in top spots, and it's always kind of like that heat thing, or we don't want to see them make it to the finals, or they get to a semifinals or finals, and we want to see them lose. And so they're always in key spots. And so I think this is a step up for Narita because he's going to be a part of this group that's featured on every show. They get big spots. And I feel like when you're not in a real faction, I know he was part of Strong Style, but it was just kind of a trio. When you're not part of like an established faction, you kind of get lost in the shuffle sometimes in New Japan. It's a very faction-based promotion. And so I think him being in House of Torture, being in an actual faction is going to benefit him more versus kind of just being in Strong Style with Suzuki and Despy. We saw how that went this year. Like, yeah, they were never 6-man champs. They had some trios matches, but then he was just kind of lost in a shuffle after that. Positioning wise, I think this could be beneficial for him for his spots on the card.
They don't have 5 members, and he's the 6th man. He is the 5th man.
Okay.
All right, so he's 5, not 6. But yeah, I mean, I don't know. Like, that's the thing. I don't know if it's really an elevation. I think that there are some things you could point to in terms of his utilization throughout the past year to cast some doubt as to how management and the booking committee actually sees the potential in him and how they're going to slot him long term. But I am hoping that this, because he's on a parallel level currently to all of his other, what I don't know what the word is, but the guys that are of the same generation as him, that's a good sign. Because otherwise, it might not be.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think you're looking at it from two, like in the world of kayfabe. In the world of kayfabe, it's like this is somewhat of an elevation. You're moving to a group that has got results on the board, but obviously people that are watching it from the position of matches and star ratings and such, it's like, well, that's an incredible demotion. I'm not going to be watching him, that kind of thing. So it's really depending on the level of engagement and how you're going. But yeah, I think for me, it's something, and he's got something now that we can follow, and hopefully. As you said, I think Young Boy Way, they're like I guess it's like his contemporaries. I guess it's probably I feel like he hasn't been on that level, but he's been paired with them, and the conscious outside of the narrative story is he's not on that level, but they've introduced that a lot. He's only really ever looked great when he's with Shota. So I think there's a bit to unpack there in relation to he needed something to elevate himself.
The word I was looking for was contemporaries, but I was going to say compatriots, which doesn't, I don't think that's right. We did have one other question from Smark and Fessawater. He said, serious question. Did Narita already plan to turn on Shota before World Tag League, or was that a lie? And my understanding is that based on the backstage comments, he'd been talking to House of Torture the entire time, and that this was always in the works.
Yeah. I you noted before, Jeremy, when you're talking about the Strong Style faction and their 6-man run. I mean, I make note that when Ren returned and he did that 6-man of Strong Style, it was against House of Torture, and he was very vocal about this idea. I'm going to change New Japan, and I'm going to get rid of this sort of bullshit. That was kind of his kind of framing of that. And it's almost like they can consciously go back to that and say, well, Ren tried. He tried to model the good Shibata approach, this vision of strong style pro wrestling. But even that, like Shibata got angry, frustrated with the guys, and instead of joining House of Torture, he just left. I'm out of here. And I think that there's something to the frustration of fighting the good fight against this company and trying to project this vision of this thing, and that's you're not getting that love back. And it's like these guys are over here telling you away. It's like over time it's going to infect you. And I think that's kind of the story they kind of want to tell. And when he said, we're not done yet, I think it was very foreboding, before the angle. It's like, yeah, we're not done yet. We've got plenty to come, but it's not going to be together,
Yeah.
Shibata's the shittiest trainer of all time.
Yeah.
Everybody that he ever influenced and trained, they all went to
Bullet Club.
or they're stuck in America not doing shit, or they're in NXT. So I mean, it's not a winning record.
That's why the dojo got switched to the academy. So moving on to the next match, semi-main event, we had United Empire, Great Okan and Hanare defeating Tomohiro Ishii and Toru Yano. So Ishii and Yano were alive. Had they won, they could have got into the semis, but UE played spoiler here and defeated them. Any thoughts on this matchup?
I was interested going into it because, the classic Gato math kind of thing was at play. And you're like, hang on here, who's who's alive? Obviously, Yano and Ishii sort of run through the tournament. I'm never really going to invest too much into that team from the way that I sort of engage, because I'm looking for sort of character development, story progression, and those guys, for different reasons, don't really necessarily bring a lot of that. But I felt like Ishii influenced Yano more than Yano influenced Ishii this tournament, so that was a good sign.
That's
but
true.
Going into the match, I was like, okay, well, there's a lot of talking around that 6-man stuff. I was like, oh, maybe they'll go here. And now that we've sort of seen it as the progression, that's the direction that we'll end up heading. I'm like watching that match and seeing the vision of what that 3-man unit for United Empire will be. I was like, okay, this is good work here. We're eliminating Yano and Ishii. We're getting them out of the way, which sets up a very different kind of final in the sense of last match on the card. And for me, I felt like it gave a bit of impetus for, well, we want to come after Ishii. That was kind of what I thought Ishii's role was going to be in this tour, was like, he's teaming up with Yano, okay, but whoever he's like getting beaten by is going to be consequential for that 6-man, and that seemed to be how it ended up panning out. So for me, I'm not going to be the type of person that's necessarily going to deconstruct the moves of the match. It's more the implications of the match, but I felt like the showcase was good. I thought Hanare and Ishii's interactions have been good. The bit of the board-on-board violence has been solid. I've enjoyed when they sort of pair up one against. So I'm like, oh, this is an interesting aesthetic. And yeah, I think it's with what we know about where United Empire is in limbo. I felt like that was a consequential enough victory at a key point to give them some momentum heading into the back end of the year.
Yeah, always good to see the old Hanare Ishii rivalry re-sparked.
Yeah.
Okan Hanare, they're reading the tea leaves. Will's jumping ship, and they're looking around, and they're like, "Damn, we're not gonna win this tag tournament. We better get some fucking gold, or who knows how much longer we might be able to stay in Shinihan." Well, what's the easiest way to get gold? 6-man tag team titles. That's always the easiest way. And so, they're looking at Team Hoff, and they're like, what's the weak link? Ishii. So they're going to take him out. They also, we're looking and they're like, oh, these Gates of Agony punks, those dudes only won 2 matches in the tournament. I'm pretty sure we can take them too. So they really don't care who it is. They're going to get a 6-man tag team title like they're the fucking Freebirds in 1983. They're doing this. All right. So that's what's happening.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the match. Like you mentioned, Ishii and Hanare, it's always fun seeing those guys mix it up. That was a large part of, Hanare's kind of upbringing, and his, travels as a young lion was trying to beat Ishii, and that was kind of one of his first kind of big feuds in the company. So with him a little more established, it was cool seeing them back and forth. And yeah, he got the pin on Ishii hitting the Streets of Rage. So really fun matchup there. Yeah, knocking out Chaos, setting up a never 6-man title match. And so that brought us to the main event, which was the Bullet Club War Dogs of Alex Coughlin and Gabe Kidd defeating TMDK. So both teams were automatically in the semifinals due to Chaos being out. So they were fighting to see who was going to be first and second to kind of determine the seeding for the semifinals. So yeah, War Dogs get the win over here for TMDK. So they win the A block, get the A1 seed, and TMDK gets the A2 seed. What do you guys think about this matchup?
Yeah, just after mentioning how, I'm not often talking about the matches and such, but this thing hummed. This was I really enjoyed this thing. And in the benefit of hindsight, it's like when I watched it live, I tweeted immediately. I got in my feelings. I'm like, oh, this is the best. And I think this might be the final. I was just in raptures because of the way that the match was set up and the way that obviously the way they engaged after it. But in hindsight, obviously that wasn't to be, but it felt like this was their final, like we're going to go out here and show everyone just how good we can be, all 4 competitors. Mikey Nichols doing the moonsault. You could have knocked me out. You could have given me a million guesses, but I'm not thinking that's coming out. Obviously, I'm always going to stand for TMDK. We're a very TMDK positive podcast down as our Australian representatives. They are sort of the forebearers of a lot of what we look to as Australians in terms of pro wrestling and their philosophy, and they're our cultural exports. Shane Haste in particular. Mm-hmm. If you want to understand what any tradesman down in Australia talks, looks, sounds, moves like, it's Shane Haste. But yeah, the way that match went, the kind of the chaos that ensued, their energies mix quite well between the War Dogs, who we often sort of describe on our show as kind of the sociopath and the psychopath. and they kind of have teamed up against, Mad and Hysterical. So it had this energy and this vibe of just propellant energy, and it was fast and it was stiff, and it was like you could tell they were working really hard. I'm not going to be able to deconstruct the moves per se, other than the things that were like, transcendent, flying Mikey. But for the most part, I just felt like, man, this is top level stuff where they made the tournament feel important because they're fighting for seeds. A very sports based presentation in that sense, where it's like, okay, well, I've seen a lot of discourse around the things about tournaments and why would you compete for this thing, or why would you do it's sports, man. Like they're trying to win. They want to get the easiest route to the trophy. So it made sense, and to me, it was a nice little inversion of what I expected going in. And they fought hard for not just the results, but I think the pride, and the War Dogs getting that victory feels significant. It feels like it's something they can run back in the future. Because I was excited to see it. I wanted to see it happen 2 days later. So, for all the the concerns about the booking direction in relation to the final and the teams that got out, I feel like it was good enough to carry them with a bit of goodwill moving forward.
Yeah, I also enjoyed this match quite a bit. For me, I think that this match was in some ways emblematic of some of the problems in this tournament, in that some of the drama about the match was kind of gone because of the fact that both teams were going to go through no matter what, and you already knew that. But there were different scenarios that were still at play depending on the outcome. So it wasn't entirely frivolous, but the match itself was fantastic, regardless of whether or not some of the steam had been let out of the booking. And granted, both of these teams, spoiler alert, they lose at the semifinals 2 days later. So it did kind of feel like these two teams went out there to basically put a stamp on their tournament and let it all hang out. And that's exactly what they did. And this was hard hitting. It was very, very good. I really enjoyed it. And I was kind of not necessarily surprised that the War Dogs won, but the finish itself kind of was a bit unexpected the way it turned out. But yeah, I think it was Nichols that got pinned here, and I think he took 2 different pile driver variations. So pretty vicious finish there, got those guys out, and we move on.
Yeah, the War Dogs have been one of my favorite teams to watch in this tournament, especially with just Gabe Kidd, like just bringing that, the madman intensity to every single match, and yeah, calling them out at the beginning, the brawl all around the rink side, and yeah, they're just vicious and brutal guys, and like you mentioned, young boy towards the finish, Gabe Kidd hits a low blow, hits a pile driver, and then they do their double team spike pile driver on Nichols to get the win. And yeah, I can understand, some people being disappointed about, all right, well, they're both already in, so why would we watch this? But I think, yeah, that competing for the seed is a very important thing. And, when I wrestled in high school, seeding was like a big deal in tournaments, and it was kind of based off your records. And I remember there was one tournament where somebody I faced, like his coach, like didn't go to like the seeding meeting, and so he should have been seated higher than me. But because he wasn't in the meeting, like I faced him in the first round. I was like one of my toughest opponents in the first round, and that totally like messed my tournament up because the seeding wasn't like done accurately. So like in sports, like, seeding is a big thing and can totally affect how a tournament plays out, what advantages you have. So yeah, it was kind of cool that it was more kind of all right, we know they're both going in, but like who's gonna get the kind of the one up on and being that A1 spot to potentially face like the quote unquote lower end of the B block.
My one thing I would have done differently maybe is have this match as the semi-main event, and then you have the upset in the main event where it's like, oh, Ishii and Yano don't get through, and then there's a lot more stakes at play the whole time because you're wondering how it's all gonna play out. But either way, the match was fantastic.
Yeah,
and that's fair too, man. I think. I'm just going to advocate for subversions to booking patterns. I think where things can get quite patterned in relation to tournament booking, especially with you got these two blocks and the four competitors. I was like, the four teams. I was like, okay, let's something different. I'll always advocate for something different if they can justify it and if the match can carry the inversion. I felt like for the most part they did that.
Yeah,
nice. Well, let's look at the second night B block finals from Miyakonjo City Hayamizu Sports Culture Center on December 7th. So we start off the pre-show. Doki defeated Shoma Kato 6 minutes and 16 seconds. The second match of the night, United Empire's Newman, Okan, and Hanari defeated the Gates of Agony along with Yuto Nakashima. House of Torture, Evil Show and Yujiro, along with Dick Togo and Kanemaru, they defeated Taguchi, Shota Umino, and Tiger Mask. That was the match aforementioned where Ren Narita ran out and hit Shota Umino in the back with the chair. Fourth match of the night, the cast team of Okada, Ishii, Yano, and Tanahashi defeated Kiyomiya, Oleg Bolton, Oiwa, and Tomoaki Hama. We don't have to spend a lot of time here, but we did get a bit of a revival of the Okada Kiyomiya feud, and the tension in that match was pretty awesome.
Yeah, I love it. They continue to kind of play that up, and yeah, seeing them mix it up again was great.
Definitely. Moving on, Bullet Club team of Alex Coughlin, Gabe Kidd, and Taiji Ishimori, they defeated the TMDK team of Kosei Fujita, Mikey Nichols, and Shane Hayes. We did get a bit of pantomime behind the screen when I believe it was it was Mikey Nichols and Alex Coughlin. They fought behind the screen. Their shadows, pretty funny.
Yeah.
But jumping into tournament action, Jeremy, take it away.
Yeah, so first B block match of the night, we had Suzuki and Nagata defeating the Rogue Army of Bad Luck Fale and Jack Bonza. So both these teams were already eliminated coming into the night. Again, fighting for pride, fighting for points, and Nagata trying to get a fist bump from Suzuki.
Yeah, the never-ending story. I look, going into the tournament, this was one of my favorite story beats, was the Nagata Suzuki stuff. I just love, you spoke obviously the fireside chat video that they did for Shota and for Ren, but the video they put together for the Nagata Suzuki stuff was the goods. And it's a perfect encapsulation of what I like about sort of New Japan's approach to storytelling, I guess, is like, obviously, you know, they're talking about their history as wrestlers at 16 or whatever, and the journalist was talking about them having a rivalry back to then. Now, obviously, there wasn't some, you know, producer or agent or booker back then going, I've got an idea for this, you know, let's tell a 40-year story. But it was like, this is the reality, right? This is the history, so we're going to leverage it and we're going to build off of it. And I just love like, what were they fighting for? It's like there's two philosophies in regards to pro wrestling, and each of them being too stubborn to acknowledge the other's vision of it. And I just love the parallel of that team throughout the tournament. And, you know, I just feel like getting to track them and to see them being like the older version of what, you know, Shota and Ren essentially were being paired as, you know, through that 7-match series or whatever it was, to see them kind of almost spoiler alert. The idea is like, you know, we can get together, but we're better as rivals. And that this kind of match kind of encapsulated that in the respect too, because, you know, Nagata had gotten a win earlier in the tournament via roll up, you know, like that kind of approach to wrestling, and Suzuki gets a win here by dropping someone on their head. I just kind of like that they both were able to get a win each in the tournament and sort of say that each one of us have proven something. And that's kind of what I viewed their team. And I thought in this match, you know, Bonza and Fale, obviously we're going to, again, as Australians, we're going to be advocating for Jack Bonza. He comes with a reputation, right? He comes with a reputation from the way that Australian fans engage with him. He's very much, people love to hate Jack Bonza down here. It's a fun part of going to a show is to just find new and creative ways to bury Bonza. But he sort of served, I think, you know, from our position, he sort of served an important role as sort of going out there and given very little, obviously, in the position he was placed, but to sort of just showcase that, you know, there's more to just you know, Australian pro wrestling, more to just Peter Boyer than Robbie Eagles, because I think Robbie's kind of like an alien, you know, like they view him as like he's a special one that's sort of come from here. So I felt Bonza in this tour and in this match, you know, he just did everything that was kind of asked of him, which was constantly getting beaten up. And Fale, for what Fale is, I think he was fine this tournament. He was better than I expected. Granted, I didn't have high expectations, but yeah, the match itself was exactly kind of how I wanted to go, and I felt was, you know, if Bonza wanted to sort of prove himself in New Japan, he was pretty much blooded in this tournament, and this was kind of the crowning achievement of that with Suzuki. Nothing sort of gets you in there like getting dropped by Suzuki. So yeah, I thought it was for what it was worth. It was serviceable, you know.
World Tag League 2023, the year of motivated Fale. Might not have looked like it, but this is what motivated Fale looks like.
Yeah, he wasn't wearing a pin me, pay me shirt, so
he wasn't wearing a pin me, pay me shirt. He gave his all. He fought his fucking heart out. You know what I'm saying? But the thing with the Suzuki and Nagata, it's funny because last week Jeremy's like, I hate this story because these guys didn't, you know, they didn't like each other at the beginning and now they still hate each other. But that's not entirely the case. It seems as though Suzuki may have given a measure of respect to Nagata. The post-match comments seem to indicate that Nagata believes that they are going to ride this momentum and this wave of success by beating Jack Bonza and Fale. That's the first step in the road to them as a major tag team. Suzuki does not seem to be convinced of any of this whatsoever. I don't think he has any intention to continue to team with Nagata, but Nagata is convinced that this is his ticket. These guys are made for one another and they're going to go on. But either way, it's been a fun story. It's kind of crazy that Narita and Umino is the tag team that didn't work out and broke up, and you know, Suzuki and Nagata is the one ending on a happy note. So I didn't see that one coming, but you know, that's what it is.
Yeah. Not much else for me to add here. Just one other kind of small story thing is, you know, Fale being, you know, trained by Yuji Nagata. That's always kind of a story that they tell whenever they face off. And there's always somewhat kind of, even though Fale is, you know, Bull Club and heel, he still has some kind of somewhat respect for Nagata. And it's always interesting when they mix it up. So
I messed up earlier. I said Shibata's got to be the shittiest pro wrestling teacher. Strike that. Nagata has to be the shittiest pro wrestling teacher.
Yes, I'm not entirely sure about that, considering the recent crop that he's bringing up. But I do think you're right, Jeremy. That it echoes the sort of the G1 match years ago, Nagata and Fale. And I before the tournament, I did say that if he was going to bring his working boots, we weren't sure if he still owned them. If he was going to bring them, he was going to bring it this match. And I think, but he surprised us for the tournament. I think he wanted to showcase, I guess, this Rogue Army vision for what he's doing, I guess, and provide sort of the gateway for that. And maybe our vision and hope is that he can step aside and now allow, the Caveman Uggs and your Phillip boys to find their way over without needing that endorsement. I think that's kind of, but he for what he did, as you said, this is a motivated version of him. I'll take it.
Mm-hmm. So now, following that, we had Atlantis Jr. and Soberano Jr. defeating Yota Tsuji and Xander Khan Jr. This was an awesome flippy-doo match.
Yeah, yeah. Again, Lucha is its own beautiful thing, and it's not something that I necessarily have always sort of gravitated towards because it can be kind of, I don't want to get people upset, but it can be incoherent at times. They sort of go in and out of certain things, and they'll like, it's like we know that Soberano Jr. had turned Rudo before coming here, and they're doing their best to try to rationalize it, which they did, and I thought that was a good element across the way, where they kind of told the story. I know Charlton was kind of hitting at it, where it's like they're just both trying to get over, it kind of selfishly, and you sort of saw bits of that on the way. But yeah, the Lucha influence, I think, is important, especially if the Zanderkin and Yoda combination, and seeing that play out and seeing, where that may be headed, to see them sort of, it felt like Yoda in his natural environment, like this is what I want to be, this is where I want it to feel. And I felt like, those CMLL guys, they worked incredibly hard. Like that's something I can always say about the guys that come over. They're coming over to get over, and they put in an effort, and that's all you can ask. And I felt like they did tell a narrative throughout the entire tour, which is something that we're starting to see. We saw it with Titan as well. Like they're telling stories with these guys that in the past, that hasn't been the level of commitment. It's kind of just been, here's the flips,
Mm-hmm.
So it feels like that CMLL relationship, which from all reports is a good thing to be partnering up with and strengthening, because CMLL seems like it's the hottest promotion on the planet. That seems like it's really reaping dividends, and I felt this match was a perfect example. If you're a New Japan fan in Japan, you go into the tag league, to have diversity like this on a card, I mean, you can't say no. It's like, yes, we're going to see the flips, off the back of, we just saw Fale, now something completely different, like that kind of thing. So yeah, I felt the match was awesome, and yeah, we'll get to him later, but I'm sure. But I just love the sexy pirate too, just quietly. Absolutely adore that man.
This was, I make no mistake, I'm not going to claim that this was the best match of the World Tag League, because it wasn't. But to me, this was my favorite match that I saw of the entire World Tag League. I love Lucha Libre, and I love it made me yearn for Fantastica Mania, which is right around the corner, a couple months away from now. Mm-hmm. And these guys went out there and they had an awesome Lucha style tag match. But not just that, there were storylines and stakes that were at play here. One thing that we kind of glossed over, Xander Khan Jr. has been angling to be accepted by Tetsuya Naito and been asking for an official spot as a member of Los Ingobernables de Japón. And, night after night, he's been getting frustrated because they've been either losing or he hasn't gained that respect or trust from Naito just yet. And the previous night, during the preview tag, Xander Khan as well as Tsuji kind of played quasi-heel, and they tore the masks off of Atlantis Jr. and Soberano Jr. And in the post-match, they were kind of saying that let's do something at the anniversary show for CMLL next year. So I don't know. That could just be one of those things where guys are just talking and they're just saying bullshit that's never going to happen. Or maybe this will actually lead to something down the line. I hope that we see these guys all interact once again, at least come Fantastica Mania. But who knows? again, the whole thing was Soberano Jr. and Atlantis Jr. It's going to be weird because the Rudo, babyface dynamic is kind of off there. But the match itself was really great. And, the babyface team got the win here and, beat Tsuji and Zandakon as they should and finished their tournament strong. And, we move on. But I thought the match was fantastic.
Yeah, I love this match. So many great moves. Zandakon Jr. hit a top rope Tiger Driver on Soberano Jr. Soberano hit a Canadian Destroyer towards the end there, and these guys were just flipping, diving all over the place. And towards the end, Soberano hit a jumping tombstone on Zandakon Jr. to get the win.
I literally yelled, "What a fucking finish!" when I saw that.
Yeah,
I was like, "What a fucking yeah!" It was so good.
They're ungovernable, that pair. Like, that's the best way to look. Zandakon is ungovernable. I said early in the tournament, I'm like, I don't know if he's the best worker I've ever seen or the most dangerous. Like, he would do. There was not one point, not one match during this tour that I didn't say during Zandakon's match, I've never seen that before. Like, he just brought stuff that I have not seen before. And I'm in with what you're talking to, young boy. I'm very there's smellness abounds in regards to Tsuji and the slow recruitment of the CMLL guys in relation to LIJ. It's something's happening there for sure.
Yeah, and after the match, Naito came out. He hugged Zandakon, but was like, "Yeah, good job, kid, but you're not quite ready, to be a part of LIJ." So the story kind of continued from there. And, as of right now, Zandakon's not announced for Fantastica Mania, so hopefully that changes.
I would be shocked if he doesn't get added at this point.
Yeah, hopefully he gets added. I think him and Teton teaming up together could be cool during that tour. But, yeah, I think he's definitely a guy that, we talked about on the show before. He's young. He's really starting to get over in Mexico. I think he did a great job throughout this whole tournament, and it was kind of the perfect way to cap off his tournament, mixing it up there with CMLL guys. And we know that Tsuji also did his excursion in Mexico and was, dying to go to Mexico as a young lion. So it was cool for Tsuji to kind of show off some of his lucha stuff as well. So, yeah, really, really fun matchup here. And so that brought us to the last two matches were win and you're in for the semifinals. So first we had the strong openweight tag team champions, El Phantasmo and Hikuleo. They defeated Monster Sauce 15 minutes and 15 seconds.
Yeah, blue versus red.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, this match was...
The Bloods and the Crips.
There's some long-term storytelling for us. Yeah, I think I like... Monster Sauce I've enjoyed. I think I've always enjoyed Alex Zane. I can't really advocate more for the man to get signed than just every time I get a chance to talk about it, I'm like, just sign this man. Maybe a third-party deal with Taco Bell Japan or whatever. He's always, they just show such engagement with the fans. Like, both of these teams are very similar in terms of their approach to getting over, I guess. Being very deferential and that kind of thing. The match itself, I mean, there's again a couple of things that I was excited by from a move standpoint. I thought the blackout sauce or whatever they call it to the outside was ludicrous.
That was dope.
Yeah. And so I do think the Monster Sauce, like, everything about their presentation was like, we want to be here. We want to do things, we've got music and tights and combo moves that complement one another. I really like their stuff. And I think, it sort of started that sort of, GOD to me throughout the tournament had kind of been on the sort of back burner a lot. They've been around, but I hadn't really taken much notice of them per se. And this was kind of the first time I was like, okay, who's going to go through? And there was a debate, I know that on your show last week, you were talking about that. And it was kind of like, which way will they go? Because teams are so similar. And obviously the logic in the booking logic is like, well, they've wrestled before, so you would think that they want to get that win back, Mm-hmm. But in the sense of the match itself, I felt like, it was a fun kind of pairing. It was very, this tournament was structured around a lot of almost like rhyming couplets. There's a lot of similar teams that would often compete. So it was a bit of that, I think. I was not surprised by the outcome, but it didn't really, the match itself was kind of like, okay, onto onto the next one kind of view for me. I thought it was good. And that's pretty much where I looked at it. It's like, it's good. I like both teams, and I like I like the parallels between the teams. But that was pretty much it for me.
One thing that I noticed, like you mentioned, these two teams are very similar. And I mean, not just the fact that they are color coordinated, but I mean, you've got, the smaller, more agile kind of athletic showman guy on each team, and then the larger kind of deceivingly agile monster to kind of round out each team. And I thought that both teams complemented one another really well. The match was really great. One thing I didn't like, and this is kind of an indictment on the entirety of the tournament, and we've sort of seen this with other similar tournaments this year, whether it was the G1 or Best of the Super Juniors, where they structure the show overall the same way you would your typical New Japan show. So like the semi-main event always feels like a semi-main event, and the main event match always feels like a main event, regardless of the stakes or who's involved in it, because they're given so much time. And this match was a win and you're in, and it was very good. The match was very good, but it wasn't wrestled with the kind of intensity that I would normally expect from two teams that their entire future as a team and potentially going to the Tokyo Dome rested on. It was more kind of wrestled like a showcase, like a WrestleMania weekend, kind of exhibition-y style match. And granted, it did make sense because both teams are baby faces and there was a lot of respect there. They were only given, probably like 15 minutes to go out there and get their shit in. But I would have liked them to have fought maybe a little bit more of a gritty style match, because the finish just kind of came like that. And it was like, oh, well, that's it for Monster Sauce, I guess. It's like, wait, what? They're out? This is it? Like, I don't know. That was a little anticlimactic, but the match itself was very good. And they did a lot of really cool and inventive stuff in that match.
Yeah, I enjoyed the match, and I agree with you. Yeah, I think there probably could have been a little bit more, maybe more urgency, more intensity there of a team trying to get into the semifinals. But overall, yeah, it was a really fun matchup, and the closing was really fun. Kind of picking up from where, Archer tosses Zayn in the blackout to the outside, both ELP and Hikuleo. Then Hikuleo comes back in, hits big choke slam onto Alex Zane. ELP does the Star Kiss, Thunder Kiss 86 springboard to Zane to pick up the win. So, yeah, really fun match. I thought both teams throughout the tournament showed some really cool double team maneuvers. We've been seeing, ELP kind of do that, the launching Thunder Kiss from assisted from Hikuleo. And then I feel like Zane and Archer, they came with a lot of really cool double team combos. Archer or Zane doing the head scissors to Archer into a cannonball and stuff like that. So they found like really creative ways to use their strengths to create really cool double team moves. And I would say Monster Sauce was ended up being one of my favorite teams from the B block, and as a team that I would really love to see continue on. I know Zane's not really signed anywhere in Archer's AEW, but their comments, they had mentioned like going worldwide, going to Rev Pro and other places to be a team. So I mean, I know we're not fans of Tony Khan signing people, but if I was him and watching this tournament, he doesn't really do a ton of Archer. I'd be like, let me sign Zane and do Monster Sauce as a team in AEW. Or if I'm New Japan, I'm like, yeah, can I get some more dates on Archer and sign Zane so we can have Monster Sauce all throughout the year.
Yeah, I think I agree. I think that there was such a, off the back of their performance, there was a genuine, people were in sort of hope that they would get through. And I feel like the match itself, I kind of do agree to some extent with Young Boy's sort of assessment in relation to sort of the intensity, but I feel like some of that is due in a lot of ways, and it's sort of been rectified as we go later in the tournament. We've kind of Hikuleo, and perhaps the fear of putting Hikuleo in there with someone like Lance Archer, who is like a fully formed version of what Hikuleo ideally would like to get to as this sort of charismatic, bigger guy, that Hikuleo is not at that level yet. So having long stretches where they can get that kind of intensity which is, driven by the big guys bringing that level of fight. I think he certainly showed it later in the tournament, but perhaps there was a bit of reticence to do it with, someone who is, ostensibly let's say a better version of you,
yeah,
at this time. But I'm with you. I agree. I think both teams. I think Monster Sauce got more out of the group stages, as it were, the league, as it were, than GOD did. But I think GOD came through in the clutch. They came through in the fourth quarter to sort of steal the game.
Yeah. But yeah, everything with Monster Sauce's presentation was just so good. Yeah, the music, the matching gear. Later on they come out with the kaiju monster thing, and just everything about them was so well done. Archer brought a lot of energy throughout the whole tour, getting the crowds involved, especially in some of those quiet towns. He was getting fired up and getting them going, and of course, doing the thing where he's beating up all the young lions, and Zane's apologizing and picking them up. Yeah, everything about their whole chemistry presentation was awesome.
Yep, I agree. Archer just loves it. You can tell he loves it.
Yeah,
in Japan.
Mm-hmm. So then that takes us to the main event. It was the IWGP World Tag Team Champions Bishamon, Hiroki Goto, and Yoshihashi. They defeated the Just Five Guys team of Taichi and Yuya Uemura to advance to the finals.
Yeah, I was shocked by this result. I'll be honest. I was looking at sort of reading the analytical brain, the sort of smarky brain was coming in. I was looking, going, oh, okay, like, we've got this pairing, we've got GOD. It's like, okay, they're through, but this result, I'm getting ahead a little bit here. I don't know if, let me just think. I'm just catching my head around this performance. I'm one step ahead. Okay, go back. My boy, Yuya Uemura. So this is another example of a situation where invariably emblematic, I think, of the last 6 months of New Japan discourse, to be fair, where when this tournament started, the amount of people that were telling me Yuya is, he's not happy. It's like, look at him, he's been paired behind Sanada. It's over for him. Like he's clearly upset. Boo-boo face Yuya. And it was like, it's done. He just doesn't want to be there. And he did a really good job, I think, of sort of being quite pensive at the beginning, that pairing with Yoda and that sort of stuff. And we sort of tracked it as we go through. He got that win against Nagata, and it meant a lot. You talk about Young Boy, about like the trainers. It's like there was a bit in that match in relation to both his trainer and his, the person he chased in Suzuki when he was coming through. But I was like, when this was happening, I was like, okay, I have faith that they're trying to tell a story here with Taichi and Yuya, because Taichi is the great unlocker. That's what he does. He unlocks who you are as a wrestler, who you should be. If you hang around Taichi long enough, he will unlock that through love, because he's such a loving man. He's the antithesis of Kawada. He's the opposite of that. A man that understands the danger of poor influences and the negative effect that can be. This is a guy that's gone through a lot to get to where he is. And with Yuya, you've seen this transition throughout the tournament. And I felt like in this match, like anyone that had this concern about Yuya, that he doesn't want to be here, or he's concerned about his booking, I felt like, showcase. Out you come, sir, and try your best and put, like, it was on him, and it was like, the support was there, if Sanada was there, the support was there. We're backing you. We're in the tank for you, Yuya. We believe in you. And to go up there against the standard. Bishamon are the standard, for better or worse, however people want to talk about it. They are the hill to be climbed. That is their character. They are the one that you must overcome. And Yuya being positioned in that space to go against them, and for Taichi to say no. And there's moments where it's like, Yuya, go. He's like holding the fort for him. I thought was great. Then Yuya fails, which is a part of the story. And then Taichi, in that, as only Taichi can, he's like crying and hugging him, and like I love the energy of that relationship, where it's like Taichi's so loving and caring, and Sanada's like two pats on the back, like I don't know how to emote. Am I emoting here? But you get that sense of like he got so close. He cared. He wanted to get it, if you feel like he wanted this accomplishment, because that's key for him to be able to get what Suji doesn't have. I got a chance here. I've got an opportunity. I'm the only guy left, alive in this tournament of the the Revi Three Musketeers, and here I am as D'Artagnan. I've got a chance. So I really love that they kind of built you to have this expectation of like, oh, they're going to do it, and there was a chance, because obviously Bishamon, you can always find different ways to get them. They're going to be there at Wrestle Kingdom, so there's always that thing in the back of your head. Maybe they'll push the just two guys. So I did like the match. I love the fire that we got to see from Yuya in this match, and I felt like hopefully that will assuage anyone's like fears that like Yuya's, he's checked out. Yuya's, they don't have enough pizza backstage at New Japan's for Yuya's liking. It's pretty clear that they're telling a narrative here, whether you like it or not. I think they told it through the tournament. I felt like this was his best, his best kind of showing of that particular approach.
Man, I knew that there were people talking about him having the unhappy face, but I guess we just have such a curated timeline. I didn't know that there was like people that thought that this was like a Sasha Banks gonna drop the title sort of thing.
I think what the issue is, mate, quite honestly, like I get this rap of being quite positive. I'm just more optimistic. And so as a consequence on Twitter, I'll get random DMs of people trying to tell me from like inside information, oh, you actually know this, really? You might be saying that, but like you're wrong because I know this. And it's like, frankly, I don't care about the outside of the story stuff. I'm telling you what I'm seeing on the screen here,
I wouldn't be surprised if we know some of those same DM droppers.
Well, I think
man,
the thing is with Yuya, we always joke about, Social Suplex are always ahead. Well, I think people that they're trying to be ahead on stuff sometimes. They're like, oh, clearly they're looking for any sign to try and be the first ones to kind of be ahead of a trend or a new story. And they're like, oh yeah, he clearly looks unhappy, unmotivated, and Yuya's been working people this whole time. His Impact run, people. Oh yeah, he's leaving New Japan. He's signing with Impact. He took it out of his Twitter bio. He's tweeting his calendar's open. He's looking for bookings and stuff like that. And yeah, I think it's all part of a bigger story they're telling with him. And
Christopher Daniels beat him out of the company, bro. One thing I will say about Yumura though, he needs to really, really rethink his fucking intro gear, because he looks like broke Elvis, and it's awful. I don't know who told him that was a tight fit, but it's not. Like, it's not at all.
He's a big fan of the Flying Elvises.
I don't know. It sucks. But the match itself was pretty good. Bishamon, they got the job done. Proving me entirely wrong. One aspect of the possibilities of who might be going to the semifinals and then even further, like the finals, we didn't necessarily discuss last week that the cultural aspect of who was involved in these deciding matches. And when you look at the way that New Japan books, they almost always are going to have at least one, if not entirely a domestic tag team, or at least one member that's domestic. And realistically, these two teams ended up being those domestic possibilities for them culturally. And sure, just five guys, Taichi and Yumura, they could have gone to a final potentially, but they definitely weren't going to win the tournament, in my estimation. And if I had thought about it from that aspect prior to last week's recording, I probably would have been a lot stronger on the idea that Bishamon was going to win this. And then, because I don't remember what we predicted last week, but I don't know if I said Bishamon was going through or not, but it would have made more sense if I'd realized like they're the only domestic tag team that can pretty much win this thing anyways. So I had kind of forgotten about that, but I don't know where they're going with just five guys in the fallout of this. I think that Stiff Josh, you had some great insights there. And I'm, again, very similarly to the way I'm looking at Tsuji and Umino and Narita and Gabe Kidd and all those guys. Like, I don't know what the future holds for them. I guess maybe this next year we're going to find some of that stuff out. But Uemura is firmly planted in just five guys at this point. And, all those guys kind of seem to be, aside from Umino, kind of like at this like I don't want to say stale, but they're sort of just at a measured point where they're not on the Wrestle Kingdom card. We don't know what's happening next. They've all faced their own trials and tribulations and, failures. And next year probably seems to be like maybe setting the stage for something to happen for each of those guys.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I also enjoyed the matchup. I think another thing that we overlooked last week in the predictions was the fact that, Bishamon, that they've won 2 World Tag Leagues, and Gato loves booking potential three-peats or, people winning, tournaments multiple times in a row. And
even just the story of it.
Right, so they could have gone and failed. It's like, oh, they're going for the three-peat, and that's something I think we overlooked because we were so focused on, all right, these guys are the champions. The champions never win. We're trying to set up challengers for the Tokyo.
That's not what it was. I was focused on, I don't want to fucking see another rematch and then another rematch. That's where I was. It was all personal to me.
Yeah, I think on our show, Dave had mentioned it to me. He sort of compared Bishamon to Okada of the tags. He said, although he said twice as many is half as pretty, but the idea of like their character, they're still like I've often been hard. It's been hard for me to warm to Bishamon over the time because it's like, they'll put on solid matches, but what am I investing in? And what I've kind of come to realize is that they're like Okada, like at the top level where they are the final boss. They are the hill to climb, the mountain to overcome. And in order to affirm that identity, to have that character, they need accomplishment. That's like literally the driving narrative for them. It's like they need accomplishments, and to give them, that's the thinking. It's like you sort of discount them, but you realize like, no, they're really going to push this to the nth degree that they are the tag team of the modern era of New Japan Pro Wrestling. They are the standard. That was kind of, sort of slipped a lot of our minds when we're thinking about the direction that they're going to go. Because if they've been doing that a bit. I understand the rematch issues around this year, but they're really doing that to sort of build people up to an extent so that someone can dethrone them.
Yeah, and the funny thing is, like, they've had a really good year, but for some reason, it kind of seems like they've had a down year. And it wasn't until like we've been having a lot of conversation about our awards and like narrowing down the categories and looking at tag team match of the year, and I'm like, man, they had a really great year, like a lot of great matches against Aussie Open and TMDK and against some mega aces. Like, these guys, they have done a great job booking them and making them, that modern, established domestic tag team, the team that you can always count on, the team that's going to be the face of the division. And so, like Young Boy was saying, it makes a ton of sense here to have them again in the finals for so many reasons. Them being the top domestic tag team, the fact that this would have been their 3rd World Tag League in a row. There was so much kind of pointing in the direction. I think it was also like a good story for Goto as well, coming back from injury, jumping into this tag league and kind of, showing that he's good and kind of reestablishing, all right, Bishamon, we're the aces of the tag team division. Yeah,
100%. I think that is the ultimate vision of them is like, and also they're just really good. Like, they're very good. And you put them in with other teams, they will help those other teams, especially ones that are trying to establish their identity.
Mm-hmm. All right, let's move on to the semifinals. Young Boy, you want to run through the undercard?
Yeah, let me pull it up. So the undercard here on the 5th, on December the 8th, City Makazono Arena in Kirishima. We had pre-show Oleg Bolton defeated Katsuya Murashima. The Bullet Club team of Fale, Bonza, Ishimori, they defeated Wato, Luebe, and Nakashima. Third match of the night, Suzuki, along with Monster Sauce, defeated the United Empire's Callum Newman, Great Okan, and Hanare. Fourth match of the night, Evil, Sho, and Kanemaru defeated Keito Kiyomiya, Oiwa, and Taguchi. The fifth match of the night was a 43-second match where we were supposed to get Ren Narita and Yujiro Takahashi taking on Shota Umino and Tomoaki Hanma. Ended up being basically a Ren Narita, and then they jumped Hanma at the bell, and they used their slyways to basically incapacitate him, get him in there, hit him with the X Factor for the 43-second win. And post-match, House of Torture continued to jump Umino and frustrate him and not let him get his hands on Narita. So sixth match of the night.
The crowd gasped at when the match ended so quickly.
Oh yeah, that was I thought that was a pretty cool angle. I mean, I guess it was a match, but it was really just an angle. But yeah, it was pretty cool. And still too early for this man to get his hands on him.
Yeah.
Sixth match of the night, Gates of Agony, along with Atlantis Jr. and Soberano Jr. They defeated the Team of Chaos, Okada, Ishii, and Yano, along with Tomohiro or Tanahashi. Seventh match of the night, just 5 guys, Doki, Sonata, Taichi, and Uemura. They defeated the LIJ team of Bushi, Shingo, Tsuji, along with Zandakan Jr. We did get a question here from Smark Infested Waters. He says, Yuya versus Yoda, hair versus hair. Who would you force to be bald?
I noticed that in this match, obviously, at the end of it, you had Yuya and Yoda sort of talking back and forth, which I love the parallel from their first interaction where they're back to back and at the end they're face to face. But the idea of them sort of hinting at that, I've been high on, like, for people that don't know, I'm going to Wrestle Kingdom, so like
nice.
I've been advocating for those young lions to wrestle. I just want Yoda versus Yuya. I know it's me and Samsa. We're out there pushing for it because I've just joked I would love them to kick off the match. I want a 10-minute time limit, then wrestle the first match of the card, just for good old time's sake, go to a draw. But the idea of that hair versus hair match, I think ties, if they go that way, it would tie so beautifully into their young lion story, because like this idea that I've talked about it, people go, I don't want that because I don't want a young lion story. But I'm like, the beautiful thing about the young lion story is they went away with Yuya ahead of Yoda and they returned with Yoda ahead of Yuya. They've inverted it. The beautiful nature of a hair versus hair, one, it ties to Yoda's, CMLL luchador influence, but it's also, you're reverting back to being like a young boy. You're going bald. So I was like, and if I was doing it, I'm watching with my partner and she's like, this was talked about. And she's like, oh, you can't get rid of Yuya's hair. So she's firmly in the Yuya hair camp. I'm also of the vision, like, shave Yoda's head, send him that little bit more ungovernable, send him back and show Yuya's progression versus him. That's who I would do it against, for both the aesthetic vision and also I think it's narratively the best way. So I very much hope that they're intimating. I know Charlton hinted at that. Who knows? But I think that would be an awesome matchup as a way for them to sort of kickstart that 2024.
My feelings on it, they should not be doing any sort of hair versus hair match with these two individuals unless it's a main event on a major card drawing major money, and it should not be like a up and coming feud, the new beginning in Nagoya night 1. When there's 3 more nights, like it can't be one of those types of things where it's fourth from the top. Like that would have to be something with major stakes and be built for a long time. But I agree, you cannot get rid of Yuya Uemura's hair. I know Yota Tsuji also has an incredible mane, but like, damn, like Yuya's hair is glorious right now. And he's probably one of the only, individuals in New Japan with an actually good bleach job. So yeah, there's no way he can be, it'd be crazy if you did that. Plus, imagine how creepy Tsuji with the facial hair and the smile and the eye, like, yeah, that would be the guy you do it to. But I kind of don't want them to do it to either guy, to be honest, unless they're drawing some major money and it's a huge match. Like we're talking like a Dominion or Wrestle Kingdom level style match, then they should not be doing that stip at all.
Yeah, I have a hard time choosing between both of them. I would not book this at all. Definitely want to see them wrestle, but not put their hair on the line. But man, there's something about Tsuji with the hair. I feel it really makes him look like a star.
Special?
Yeah. That's a tough one. But I do hope that they end up wrestling at Wrestle Kingdom and kind of kickstart their feud. And I know Tsuji's comments were kind of like, you've come back, you have long hair like mine. You're wearing, red like I am. Like, why are you copying me? You should be doing your own thing. So, yeah, they are kind of building this story there between them. And yeah, like you mentioned, Stiff Josh, from when they were young Lions. I mean, that was the whole rivalry and story with those guys trying to one up each other. And now that's kind of continuing with them being back from excursion. So yeah, I think that's definitely the way to go. And plus, we're getting this whole like just five guys LIJ feud as Naito and Sonata are, heading to the main event in the Tokyo Dome. And also, we know the whole backstory of Sonata leaving LIJ. So I think this whole, LIJ, just five guys kind of scenario here works out for their rivalry too.
Yep.
And so after that, we had the semifinals of the World Tag League. One semifinals, it was ELP and Hikuleo defeating TMDK 16 minutes and 44 seconds.
Yeah, first shock for me, as I was getting I knew what's happening. I booked it the night before. I was pretty confident in this direction, and this didn't happen. Silly old me. This was there's some interesting spots in the match. Its finish was kind of the same kind of thing, where it's kind of came a little bit out of nowhere for me. But what I liked about this, and I was watching it with my partner, who is a big ELP fan. She's just becoming a wrestling fan, and ELP is her guy.
Nice.
And what was interesting was I was like watching him come out with the shoulder, and I was like, classic pro wrestling brain kicks in. I'm like, oh, look, they're going to protect him here with this shoulder. Like, he's got this sore shoulder. They're building this story in the match here to just, give him a nice out for when he eventually loses to the well-established TMDK team here. And obviously they're telling that story throughout the match. And then I'm watching going, oh, but now he's getting beaten up a lot here, and they're really selling it. Just like, oh, maybe that doesn't seem like the way they would do it. So it was kind of a fun thing to watch, and it certainly magnified in the final. I went the same way with my brain, where I just kind of halfway through it said, okay, I'm just going to switch off that thinking and just kind of watch it here, and get kind of invested in the result. Because for me, it's like I'm a TMDK supporter, so I'm like here hoping for them to get there, and obviously with the year that they've had, so I was like, oh, they kind of need to get crowned at some point, and I'm watching this thing, but there were some inventive spots. I thought there was some interesting stuff they were doing. Again, Shane Hayes is a scary athlete, and any chance he gets to be showcased against guys like ELP, I'm always for that. I thought he had a great tournament, by the way, Shane Hayes. I thought he was both protected and he looked good in those key main event spots. But yeah, for the match itself, I enjoyed a couple of spots, and I kind of liked Hikuleo getting to have to do a bit of the heavy lifting at the end, which he often does, but then defers to ELP. But because of the situation with that shoulder story, they went with Hikuleo being sort of the consequential guy, and I thought he did pretty well in that spot. Surprised me a little bit.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily, well, to be quite frank, I was spoiled on all this stuff because I was binging it before we watched the show, so I kind of already knew what happened. But I mean, like, last week, me and Jeremy were kind of going through the scenarios, and no matter what way you sliced it, it seemed like we were getting some sort of rematch scenario one way or the other. So I wasn't entirely surprised by this fact. Plus, we'd already discussed previously that while we also support Team DK, the fact that they've already been put in prominent spots so many times in the very recent past, it kind of worked against them to really be a finalist or even win the tournament in general. So I wasn't too surprised that they did lose here. I wasn't necessarily that impressed with either of these two matches, just to be honest. I don't know if maybe it was a case of long tournament and some of these teams, getting ready to gear up for, the finals and everything like that, and kind of taking a night off. But I kind of felt a little underwhelmed by the performances of all four teams in these two semifinals. And they kind of echo some of the sentiments I had previously about the Monster Sauce and God match, where it was like, yeah, it was good. And actually, I thought that one was better than both of these matches. But, there wasn't a high sense of urgency and desperation. And that kind of was what I felt here in both of these matches. They were just kind of like matches where they're they were happening. They're going through the motions, and yeah, there were hope spots and everything like that. But like, it just wasn't really wrestled with that sense of gravity that I like to see in the final semifinal night of a tournament like this. So I was a little surprised by that, but God picked up the win, and then it started. Once that happened, you kind of had to figure like, okay, they're the fucking strong champions, and they beat Bishamon in the first night of the tournament. Like, all right, I can kind of see where we're going from here now.
Yeah, I at least had the sliver of doubt that the War Dogs and the El Phantasmo of it all, that there may be just a little hint of that. I do have a question, though, young boy, in relation to that. These matches not feeling like they had that level of intensity. Do you think that's somewhat, and not to spoil the next match, but do you think it's somewhat a product of, I felt like in both matches, they was kind of, one of the teams was showcasing their less prominent member, like whether it was Hickalo in one and the other being Coughlin, that both of them were getting the sort of the consequential moments that maybe they're not at that level at which the other guys are to be able to convey that beyond just get my shit in, get through the spots and do what I need to do.
It could be. I'll be completely frank. I had to, over like the last 3 days, watch like from night 9 on. So
instant wrestling fatigue. Yeah.
So it's not like I have the deepest level of it. And now that you're saying that, I'm like, I guess that is true. I guess maybe they were doing that, but it wasn't that. It was just like short match times. It wasn't worked at a really high level. I wasn't getting very excited watching it. Whereas like the finals we'll get to, are very, very, very exciting. These matches just didn't have that same level of intensity for me, which I was a little surprised by. They felt like if you'd stuck both of these matches into, like, say, the second match of any tournament night on this card, they wouldn't have been out of place.
Yeah, I think another thing too that kind of hurt it was just the environment. Wherever they were at for this show, the crowd wasn't super hot. I feel like a lot of times they normally would go to a bigger building for a semifinal, and you have a little bit more of a hot crowd. So I think that kind of hurt too, because the crowd wasn't super into it, and then you already have the guys kind of. I don't want to say they were taking it easy, but compared to previous matches that all these teams had earlier in the tournament, they put on a lot more bangers than they did here on this evening. And again, I don't know if it's because they're telling the whole story of ELP's shoulder being injured and putting the focus on Hikuleo. There could have been a lot of different reasons why maybe this match didn't quite click like some of the other matches did. And I think too, just I don't know, just even the whole scenario of, I think with the GOD and TMDK, it was kind of like both teams I really didn't want to see advance. But I like both teams. But like we said, TMDK, they've already had 3 title matches. They've been positioned super high, like solid tag team. I wish they would have won the titles like earlier in the year. And then with GOD, it's like, all right, the strong tag champions, if they win, then they're potentially going to be facing Bishamon again. And it's like, this will be like the second match, which could lead to a third match, which we now know. And so it's just like 2 bad scenarios. And like if TMDK would have won, then War Dogs could have won, and you could have got a rematch of that, which could have led to another so it's like, I just wasn't feeling what they were doing here.
Yeah, speaking of why they're in the smaller building, the end's down.
Yeah.
Yeah. The rain is up, though. The rain is up. The end is down.
Yeah. We had a question here from Les Commission 7252. Says, with TMDK being eliminated and losing World Tag League, do you guys think New Japan misses the opportunity of potentially pushing several stars just to not sign them at the end? They've done it with Leo Rush, Tom Lawler, JR Kratos, and the West Coast Wrecking Crew. With them now doing the same to Shane and Nick, what's the possibility of them signing for another company like WWE, TNA, or AEW? Will Gale try to push them even stronger heading into 2024 to keep the TMDK faction alive?
I'll just start off by saying I love TMDK. I think they're an incredible tag team, and I kind of think they're at home in New Japan, and I don't think that they have those options in the same way that, like, say, for instance, like Aussie Open did. Mainly for the fact that, like, they've already been to WWE. They've done that whole song and dance. They never got called up to the main roster. There was a reason for it. And I've never heard of any indication that Tony Khan was jonesing to bring them into AEW. Otherwise, he probably would already made the offer as it stands. And, I think the Aussie tag team quota is already filled there. It's going to be hard for them to push another one. That's kind of the way that the mentality is. And I mean, sure, they could go to Impact, but I mean, they live in Australia. What would be the point of doing that at this point? I think right now that the best potential career move is just stay in New Japan. I don't think it's a similar situation to the other ones that he just mentioned.
Yeah, I think that's this. I'll be honest. This is my least favorite discourse in relation to why we must push people, why we must do things because we are concerned about them being signed by someone else. I think that it's prevalent with the War Dogs as well. I hear that same sort of stuff, like, oh man, they missed an opportunity to push these guys because now they'll be looking at options elsewhere, and it's kind of like, well, I just think that kind of thinking ultimately leads to a 50-man G1 because we've got to keep everyone happy. I think that the vision is, it's like they've backed the people they've backed. Team DK have a very serviceable role in New Japan. It's a prominent role. Let's not kid ourselves. Like, they were in this tournament, they were presented seriously and they felt like a serious team. They were pushed strong. They were given that kind of the gravitas of being seen as a leading team. That's a strong enough presentation, I think, for their role. They're at their age too, and as all the things that Youngboy mentioned in terms of their options, I feel like fundamentally, like, I'm not going to be sitting here going, the story should dictate this because if they don't sign them, they'll go elsewhere. Okay, they'll go elsewhere if they choose to go elsewhere. I just don't like entertaining that aspect because it just leads to making decisions about directions based on the fear or the whims of somebody else. Like, Tony Khan's not going to dictate the story, and if the more that happens, the worse that it gets. So I think the vision should be, we've got our guys that we're behind, we're going in that direction, whether you like it or not. Unfortunately, that's the decision we've made, and we're going with it. And I will advocate for that rather than worry about if we're going to get the return of Slapjack.
Yeah, I feel as a booker, you can't really let all time people's unhappiness kind of control the booking and the story, or fans being upset that their favorite team is not getting pushed. And Team DK, they are a little bit older, and they're that seasoned veteran tag team, and I think they're in the perfect spot in New Japan. And sometimes the story is you get close and you just fall short, and that's the story for Team DK in 2023. They had 3 title matches. They had a never 6-man title match with Sabre against Team Hoff. And yeah, they kept coming close, but just fell a little bit short. And 2024 is going to be a new year. And maybe the story is they learn from their mistakes of 23 and they're going to come roaring back and eventually win the titles and have a good year. Because they have been driving that home that on commentary, like they are like one of the most established tag teams that have never won the IWGP tag team titles. And so I feel like they're going to be set up to have a good 2024. And I wouldn't be concerned about them, like you mentioned, jumping for all the reasons you guys mentioned. Yeah, it's kind of sad that's kind of like the first thing people think of when their favorite team loses or their favorite guy is losing. Like, all right, like they're potentially going to jump somewhere because they're not getting utilized. And I think for Team DK, it's like, They were utilized. They were in top positions all year. I think it'd be a different story if they weren't being booked. Not being booked is the key sign of like, all right, what's going on? If they're being booked, then they're in a good spot. All right, so then the other semifinal, we had Bishamon defeating the War Dogs. We kind of talked about it a little bit, but any other thoughts on Bishamon here going through and being the War Dogs?
Other than I was, surprised that we went that direction. I will admit, I as opposed to Youngboy, I was watching and my vision was like, maybe they're going to do a 3-way tag. Like, that was kind of my thinking would be, we were going to get that Bishamon would lose here to the War Dogs, who would eventually fall in the final, and the War Dogs would say, no, I'm not going to stand for that. I want to get into this. So in my head, that was always the booking. Like, that was the logic of how it was going. So I was surprised, as I mentioned before, when I was confused about where we were. It's been a long league. The vision was like, I just felt the War Dogs in that same way that you're talking about, Jeremy. I just had this feeling like, oh, the momentum's here. It's on their side. They're fresh and they're emerging. And I was surprised by the finish. Kind of came it was kind of a bit flat, like it kind of just happened. But as I said, it was sort of Coughlin did a lot of it. And for me, the big takeaway from this match was just, was Gabe Kidd's reaction and the way that he wrestled throughout the match he was cocky and he was arrogant and he was too busy focusing on the camera and telling everyone he's a madman, And in the background, you would see Goto having to make saves that if he was paying attention and he was concentrating, he would have been able to stop that. And then he has that great realization at the end and throws an all-time, throws one of the guardrails into the crowd. That was something different. So I was like, okay, they got enough heat out of this, loss to power Gabe Kidd. That man is powered on resentment. So I think, I can accept this as an option, but I was surprised. I will admit I was very surprised. I didn't, in my head, I wasn't necessarily thinking Strong versus IWGP. I should have, because that seems like that brand's gone the way of the dodo. So I should have been doing it, but nonetheless, it was fine. And I think, but the stuff that was consequential was stuff that wasn't necessarily as overt in the ring per se. It was more just character beats.
Yeah, I think another thing too that could potentially have caused the War Dogs to lose was Kidd being distracted with Will Ospreay. They have their big match coming up this Saturday for Rev Pro Uprising, and so there's been a lot of stuff for him, calling out Ospreay on camera on the show. So I think he was distracted with that too. Ultimately, I was kind of disappointed with Bishamon winning here, just because this year, they went back to a 2-block format, and previous couple of years have been doing a single block, which you always got rematches with a single block. And so also 2 blocks is like, all right, you got opportunity for a fresh final matchup, a match we didn't see the whole tournament. But they did the same exact thing they would have done if they had done a 16 block, a 16-team 1-block tournament. Like, why did they bother doing 2 blocks if they were just going to do the same thing of having, Team A beats Team B, and then they both get to the finals, and then they wrestle again, and then they wrestle again. I didn't like how that played out.
They ran more shows, Jeremy.
Well, yeah. They brought some more yen in, but
so they made more money. The yen is down. What are you talking about? They gotta get these bookings. Speaking of, we didn't talk about it last week, and I don't want to jump into a whole discourse, but I'll just say real quick, the stuff between Ospreay and Gabe Kidd on that video chat is easily some of the most compelling, piece of work that I've seen in pro wrestling. It's everything that I love about pro wrestling. I want to see these guys fucking kill each other.
Yeah.
Well, they've already murdered Chase Owens. Chase Owens is dead as a result of that promo battle. It was great.
But yeah, I mean, I'm fine with. I should have seen that Bishamon once what you had mentioned earlier, Jeremy, the fact that they were chasing the 3rd win in a row. That just completely passed my mind, because I was in this mode where I'm like, they're the champions. We're not going to get all these rematches. 2 blocks, blah, blah, blah. And then, I should have looked back and been like, you know what? How many times has Gato done this exact booking? The 2 finalists fight on the first night, they beat the champions, and then they rematch in the finals. Like, he's done this before. We've seen it with Hiromu and Desperado before in Super Juniors. We've seen it in many tournaments. So it wasn't that surprising. I said what I said about the match, but I wasn't disappointed about the outcome necessarily. I was disappointed more so by the match quality and the lack of intensity. One last thing I will say, though, I, like Josh, did think that we were going to wind up in the out because we were getting another rematch. I thought to myself, there's no way, no matter what the outcome is, that we're getting this at Wrestle Kingdom a 3rd time. We are definitely getting some 3 or 4-way type match, which is, that's a classic Wrestle Kingdom trope. Alas, that is not what's happening. So we'll jump into the final night here. So doing the rundown very briefly. Final night, December the 10th, World Tag League from Grand Messe Kumamoto. The pre-show, there was a Frontier Zone tag team match. Oleg Bolton and Taguchi, they defeated Assassin and Kode Nozaki. Yeah, I heard some good things about Nozaki. People were impressed. Atlantis Jr., Master Wato, and Soberano Jr. defeated the TMDK trio of Fujita, Nichols, and Haste. Monster Sauce, along with Suzuki and Nagata, defeated the Bull Club team of Coughlin, Fale, Kid, and Bonza. The United Empire's Callum Newman, Great O'Khan, Hanari, and Jeff Cobb defeated Tomohiro Ishii, Toru Yano, Oscar Luebe, and Nakashima. And it seems to be that coming out of this match, it is confirmed that the United Empire is going to pursue the never open weight 6-man tag team titles. They jumped Ishii after the bell and made their intentions known. So also the first time that we saw Cobb on this tour. So he's back in Japan now. The House of Torture, Ren Narita and Sho, they defeated Shota Umino and Tiger Mask, and another match where we had shenanigans that led to a quick win over Tiger Mask. But Umino did get a chance to lay some hands on Ren Narita as he dove through the ropes and planched this man, and he got his licks in. So we'll see how that continues out. Sixth match of the night, House of Torture's Evil, Kanemaru, and Yujiro. They defeated Kiyomiya, Oiwa, and Tomoaki Hanma. Coming out of this match, it seems as though Umino is going to form an alliance with Kiyomiya and Oiwa to combat the House of Torture. So that seems to be the direction that they're taking. Seventh match of the night, we had Tanahashi and Okada. You called them the Dream Team earlier. We, around these parts, affectionately know them as the Mega Aces. They defeated the Gates of Agony, because why not give those guys one more loss on their way out? And then the final undercard match, the LIJ team of Bushi, Shingo, Naito, and Tsuji teamed up with Zandakon Jr., and they defeated the Just Five Guys team of Doki, Sonata, Taichi, Taka Michinoku, and Yuya Uemura. This was the first match of the tour where we saw both Taka and Tetsuya Naito in action. And post-match, we finally got a measure of respect paid to Zandakon Jr. as the LIJ members allowed him to come in and do the fist bump in the air. Many people were under the assumption that this was the finale of the storyline of him wanting to be a member of LIJ, and that was a formal invitation. Not so. Backstage comments confirmed that he is not an official member of Los Ingobernables de Japón, but he is an affiliate. So, you know,
Naito's scared about my working theory is Naito's like, I just got to keep an eye on how many of these Tsuji related guys I'm letting in. You know, there's power in numbers here, and I just got to. Yeah, he's like peer pressured into it by the lads. You know, okay, come in, but I'm not going to fully accept that. Just as a note for that match, I loved that final undercard match for one reason and one reason alone. I am I understand the Western discourse around Sonata and Naito being not a hot match. It's cold main event. They obviously didn't tell the Kumamoto crowd about that because the crowd popped for the optics of those two standing face to face. And everything for fans out there that are looking at trying to understand the dynamics between these things, everything you need to know about LIJ and Just Five Guys is emblematic in the way that match starts, with Naito out front of his boys and Sonata behind his boys. And that moment where Sonata parts them and walks through, that crowd realizes, oh, we're getting Sonata and Naito. And we get it for like 40 seconds, we get nothing from it. But they are excited about that. And that's something that I've been told constantly it's a cold match. But I am, as the lone Sonata advocate, as someone that was watching TNA sporadically, Sonata was someone I knew prior to New Japan. I've always been hopeful of this moment, and I feel like that they will do something there that people are not expecting. I'm just going to be the lone advocate for that. As here, if I get my one shot on this here program, I'll make that known. But I do think it was telling that was something that the crowd were invested in.
Do you guys think that Naito is worried about the potential reintroduction of Andrade to CMLL? Does this usurp his authority role in the power struggle that is Los Ingobernables?
He may need him. That LIJ stuff. I know LIJ lore is often it's Tumblr lore. They're very synonymous, but I do think to some extent the idea that like Naito is that Tsuji is recruiting. Like, look at how like Titan joined. He just said, "I'm in," and then Tsuji did the same thing. Now Tsuji said before the thing, "Oh, Xandicon, no, he's not. He's just an ally." But throughout the tour, he's been slowly prodding, trying to get him into the group. If I were Naito, I'd be a little concerned that Tsuji is, getting too big for his britches, as they say, and trying to recruit people that are aligned with him, a new generation, into the group that is usurping his authority. So I do feel like there is a story beat there. And the fact that Sonata is the one who left him and is now in a kayfabe in a position of significance, champion, has his own faction, elevated to just like ghosts of LIJ past. There's got to be a hint in his head of like, oh, do I need to be different with Tsuji? If I'm not, will he usurp me? And rather than leave to start his own faction, will he take mine? So I do think there's a lot of depth and nuance to this pairing, this group of LIJ and just five guys. And I think that, I think it's the story to watch moving forward. I think that Tsuji we all know he's him. We all know it. It's just a matter of how he goes about it. I feel the turn is coming at some point. He will usurp Naito at some point. It's just how he does it that'll be interesting. And I think Andrade being available is it's like manna from heaven. Like, thank God that was an option, because we've got an ability to go back to the origin of the group to be able to tell that story. So yeah, I'm really. That's one of the areas I'm really following and really invested in for sure.
Yeah, I think that they pretty much set that whole story up when Tsuji came back and challenged Sonata and then gets an LIJ. It's like, all right, he's coming in hot. He's already challenging for the title. He's a part of LIJ. And, rarely do you see like the other guy, the undercard heavy guys usurping the main guy and getting a title shot. So from like day one, they're telling that story like Tsuji thinks he's the man. He's getting a title shot. He's skipping Naito. He's skipping Shingo, two former champions, and getting in there. And so yeah, I do think this is going to be a long form story of all right. Eventually, he's plotting his takeover. So whether that's he formed his own group with Xandicon and some other guys that you bring in, or he takes over LIJ. I think that's a big story that's coming up, and maybe a New Japan Cup they're in the same bracket, or a G1 they're in the same block. Like there's so much stuff they can do, and I think we're seeing a little tension between them and Tsuji, wanting to break out and be a leader, but also LIJ being Naito's thing.
Yeah, you can't have a mutiny without a pirate.
Yeah. So then that brought us to the World Tag League 2023 final match. Champions versus champions. Bishamon, Hiroki Goto, and Yoshihashi defeat the GOD team of El Phantasmo and Hikuleo. 40 minutes and 30 seconds.
I can say it didn't feel like it when I was watching it. Look, I'm not the match guy, but for me, was for all the criticisms that people have had, and yes, I hear them in relation to rematches, we could see where this was going, right? We could see the potential direction that, that they were potentially going. It would go one of two ways. And so that dread is over this match. But I saw, I think was it Despy Van Hemmerstock or whatever on Twitter, and he put a really great, as he tends to do, very, very, very eloquent man. He said that that this match had for all the concerns we had, it had to deliver a home run to justify its existence. And so knowing all of that, and then the fact that they go out there, in my opinion, deliver a home run, I was in raptures, and I've been a day one adopter of sort of ELP, the babyface, from back in his days previous to joining New Japan, and Rev Pro days, as this sort of unconventional babyface that people, the lovable dickhead kind of thing. And so, but this to me was I've been really concerned about where he's placed this last 6 months post the Finlay stuff. And this felt like his crowning performance is like what I can be. He basically, wrestled this match with one arm and doing the underdog baby face, and his selling and his emotion and his just commitment. Like, they have been, for the whole tour, have been showing you their heart. But this was the moment where he fully showed you his heart, and that's what New Japan fans will connect to. They wanted him to win. My God, that place would have gone nuts had he won that night. They were in it with him in the struggle, and the way they set it up, the way that Hikuleo went through that table, his head went through that table, and the story of the way they built that and the way they structured it, so that, like, Hikuleo's a dangerous man, which is a great positioning for him from a kayfabe standpoint. Like, we got to get rid of this guy because, you know, he's the real threat. And then ELP being like, well, I'm left on my own, and the Lucha Influence came in. Who cares about tag rules? We had like 8 minutes of 2-on-1. I don't care at this point. Just feed me the story of ELP realizing that I'm exhausted, my tag partner's gone, and I have to fight Bishamon on my own, and the innovative and creative ways that he was able to counter them and use their stuff against them, which he's constantly done in the past, adopting other people's moves, but to do it out of, defense and to do it out of survival, I thought was incredible. And then, to get to the end and just be constantly kicking out surviving zombie ELP at the very end, that almost Jay White kick out. For me, it was a crowning performance for him, and it sets up. I know what it sets up. I know the direction it is, but I hope that the enormity of the match, the fact that it went so long, the fact that it felt consequential, will carry in people's memories to the Dome, so that when he's there, the crowd is still invested in that struggle. Because then it can be like, we're 1-1 and we're heading to overtime, and it's like, now we get to crown ELP on the biggest stage. That 2,500 we're about to go nuts. I want 30,000 going nuts. And I think that if they can do that and they can get ELP to where we, perhaps saw him previously, I think that would be a win out of this. Yes, we want to elevate new guys. Well, here's the guy we're going to elevate, along with Hikuleo, who I think has gotten a lot out of it. It may not be the person that other people want, but to me, if you want, it's a perfect example of how in one night we can pretty much do a better job of what we've been trying with Tama Tonga for 2 years. We can pretty much do it in 40 minutes here with ELP as the sympathetic, lovable rogue who's turned good and is showing you everything he's got. I thought it was an incredible performance from him, and I loved the match.
Yeah, this match was very likely the best match of the entirety of the tournament, which is what you hope for when you have a World Tag League final. Very often World Tag League finals are good, but not necessarily the high, lofty, great matches you'd like them to be. This was the exception. One of the longest, or actually I think it is the longest World Tag League match in history, and one of the longest single fall tag team matches in New Japan history that didn't go to a draw of some sort, that actually had a finish. So it's getting a lot of positive reaction from the fan base out there. Some of the stuff that they did that I really enjoyed, I liked how they set up that table in the early part of the match, and they kind of borrowed a little bit of the Kenny Omega-ism. You set up a table, kind of leave it, forget that it's there, and then way later in the match, when you've completely drawn the attention away from it, reintroduce it at a pivotal and at a pivotal point in the match where it actually is a difference maker. I kind of think that the match structure and layout reminds me a little bit of like the 88 World Tag League finals, where you have the babyface in peril left to his own devices because, the dominant tag team took out his younger, up and coming star tag team partner. And so he sort of has to try and survive on his own. That's also kind of similar to the 1981 Real World Tag League with the Funks getting beat by Brody and Snuka. So kind of similar storylines there. I'm sure that they've probably seen those matches. There's probably some inspiration. Those are very famous tag league finals from the other promotion. But the match itself was really great. I think that for me, again, I was spoiled going into this match. I'd seen that people were reacting really well to it, and I definitely enjoyed it. But I was getting deep into the match, and I was like, this is very good, but I'm not seeing why there's all this love for this match. And then once, and taking nothing away from Hikuleo, because I thought that he did a great job as, the monster in this match. But once he was taken away and ELP basically had to be this come from underneath, never say die baby face. That was like the shining moment of the match because the crowd really started reacting viscerally to that. And, there was a couple times where it looked like he might pull it out. He got really close to being able to win the match for his team. I sort of liked the fire that I saw from GOD as a team, where they weren't just this kind of hokey, all right, come on, like trying to boost the crowd up, but like, ELP at the beginning he said something and he called like go to a bitch, and I was like, whoa, where's this guy been all tournament long? And then at one point they were bringing out the chairs, and then instead they set up the table. One thing I don't want to rag on him too much, but Chris Charlton and Walker Stewart were on the call, and Charlton's like, yeah, they're deviating away from the type of wrestlers that we've seen come to know them to be the last couple weeks and months. Them pulling out a table is uncharacteristic. And then Walker Stewart goes, yeah, well, deviating from the game plan will either help them, sometimes they'll help you to win, other times they'll cause you to lose. And I was like, all right, John Madden, like it's the most obvious thing but of course it's going to help you to win or potentially lose. One of those two things always happens in every single wrestling match that has ever occurred ever in history. But I thought that was funny. But yeah, Bishamon, they also busted out some moves that I've never seen them use before. I liked when they set up the moment where all throughout the match, ELP's body was failing him. He was getting so isolated and beat up that a lot of his regular offense, he wasn't able to do it. And at one point, they sent Hikuleo up to the top rope to do the giant splash. And it was a cool moment, but damn, if he didn't land on his fucking knees like he was Tamina Snuka. I mean, he took the Tamina bump hard.
Yeah, he moved over his knees right there in that one moment. Yeah.
But ultimately, Bishamon, they overcome, they win. Let me ask you guys before I kick it to Jeremy, how many times do you think in the history of New Japan's tag league under any name, how many times do you think the champions have ever won that tournament?
I think this is the first time, isn't it?
This is the first time in the history of the World Tag League, but in the history of New Japan as a whole, it has only happened prior to this 3 other times. I mean, that's a pretty rare stat. I had to look it up myself, but Fujinami and Kengo Kimura, they were the I believe the WWF International Tag Team Champions going into the 85 MSG Tag League. And that was the same tournament where they were awarded the IWGP Tag Team titles. Chono and Muto as Team NWO, they won the 97 Super Grade Tag League. And then in 2007, Giant Bernard and Tyson Tomko won the G1 Tag League as the IWGP Tag Team Champion. So this is pretty rarefied air. Ever since this tournament was turned into the World Tag League under Bushiroad, the winners of the tournament always went on to face the champions at Wrestle Kingdom. So the champions have just never won it. But given the way things have shaken out this year, you've got the strong champions, the IWGP champions. They're going to rematch it at the Tokyo Dome. One thing I don't like about that is a kind of a detriment, is that this match was so good. There is no way that they're going to be given enough time and opportunity to do an equivalent match. We saw the same thing happen recently a few years ago with Hiromu and Desperado, where they wrestled at the Tokyo Dome after a tag league, and it was a good match, but it couldn't match up because they weren't given the same opportunity. And I don't think these guys will be able to repeat what they did here. But all the same, one of the best tag team matches of the year, for our awards for 2024, this is the front runner right now for match of the year and tag match of the year. I'm sure it'll get passed up, but a great match. And looking forward to the rematch.
Yeah, I thought this match was great as well. And I know you were kind of poking at Walker's comment there, but I did thought that kind of pointing out that, him and Charlie pointing out that they're going against the game plan. Since they've left Bullet Club, they've been wrestling clean. They've become big fan favorites. They've really rested on their skill. And so, yeah, kind of like that desperation of, all right, we're going to pull up the tables. We're going to do anything that we can. Yeah, Hikuleo trying to do the Thunder Kiss 86, and it showed you. I think this was kind of showing what you were mentioning, young boy, like that was missing from some of the other matches. Like you saw the desperation and kind of the grit of really wanting to win this matchup. And also the story of ELP, like you guys mentioned, is kind of being this never say die babyface towards the end was great. And I thought the whole ending sequence here was really great, and the crowd really helped the near falls. So towards the end, you had ELP, 2-on-1 against Bishamon, and they go for the Shoto. He escapes. He hits a neck breaker and a super kick and gets a near fall. Crowd pops when Goto kicks out. Then he hits the Ushigoroshi on Goto, getting very cocky and confident. Hits Goto's big move. Goto kicks out at 1. I popped for that near fall. Crowd pops. They're going crazy. And then ELP hits the CR2, which is his main singles finisher. And so I'm like, oh wow, they're gonna give ELP the win like this, because I think not many people kick out of that move. And so hits that. Goto kicks out again. Crowd's losing their mind. And then Goto comes back. He slams down ELP. They do their new top rope bulldog double team move. They hit the Shoto. 1, 2, 3. Bishamon gets the win. Big moment for Goto, coming back from that injury, fighting through adversity. Eating all ELP's big moves here, getting the win for the team, and yeah, capturing their 3rd World Tag League championship in a row. Yeah, just awesome stuff. And like I said, I was disappointed going into the match just because it was a rematch and know the potential for a 3rd match. But yeah, I thought they told a really great story here. Like I mentioned, the desperation of GOD wanting to go through. Bishamon wanting to prove they're the ace tag team, getting that win back from GOD and cutting Hikuleo off. I mean, there's just so many great, just like traditional tag wrestling, and then looking back to those tag finals you mentioned, young boy, and then it's the closing stretch of ELP fighting through everything, and then Goto coming back and fighting through everything and getting this big crescendo, and the crowd loved it. And yeah, post match, they cut their promo and they say they want to face GOD again at the Tokyo Dome, but they want both titles on the line. So we're getting Bishamon versus GOD at the Dome for both titles, and I wasn't sure if they said unification or not, but it does seem very clear that the Strong brand seems to be going away, and they're going to probably end up unifying these titles at the Dome.
Yeah, I'll take that. I'll take that option. I know there was a lot of talk around, a 3rd match or whatever it is, but my fear was that we're going to get like a challenge for an AEW team or something. I thought we've beaten everybody here, and we'll challenge. I think our Aussie Open would have been in play. I would have imagined as the team that never lost the title, and that this was the chance for Bishamon to affirm themselves as the true champions by challenging them to this sort of spot. But obviously that plans change, and I feel like that's probably what happened, and we've pivoted. And all I would add to that bit that you mentioned before, young boy, about the table spot. In relation to that spot, what I liked about that, as you were mentioning too, Jeremy, the changing game plan, was the beautiful thing was it was different. They deviated from what they've been doing as like the lovable guys, but the crowd cheered them this time. They cheered for them to go for those things. And that shows me that transition of them now where they've got the position, they can be a little less overtly sanguine or like, oh, I love everybody. And they can sort of add a little bit extra layer of that sort of shithousery or dickheadery that they've had in the past, can kind of influence a little bit of their action. I felt like the crowd affirmed them to do that. And in beautiful wrestling logic, it was Hikuleo who grabbed the table. It was Hikuleo who went through the table, Chekhov's table, as it were, throughout that tournament. So throughout that match. So yeah, I'm here for the rematch. I understand it won't be as long, but if it's on a bigger stage, maybe more people will see that crowning moment. Hopefully, for ELP, if they go Bishamon, check back later.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do like when guys who recently turned face, like that, they do kind of still have that little bit of like inner conflict and still want to kind of go back to their old ways and cheat. And it's funny, my wife, she's a licensed mental health counselor, and one of the things she hates about wrestling is turn. She's like, you just can't turn, like completely change your personality in one moment like that and completely change your characteristic and everything and just never go back. So I do like it, yeah, when people like ELP and Hikuleo, they were part of Bullet Club. They're these kind of low down, dirty guys, and then now they're faces, but now they're kind of still struggling with that, and they were able to kind of let it out here. So that was cool.
Yeah.
We did have some questions here. So first, Les Commission 7252 says, during the press conference, how important was it when ELP acknowledged that Hikuleo is the same as Umino, Narita, Tsuji, and Uemura as one of the young stars for New Japan in the future? In my opinion, Hikuleo has done much more than these four. He sent Jay packing from New Japan and became both strong and openweight tag champion. He made it out of the A block as a second finalist and was in the finals of World Tag League.
Yeah, I mean, he has done more because he's been booked to do more.
yeah. He's also much older, so
and he's older too.
Yeah, so they probably got to get going while they can. Make hay while the sun's shining, I guess. I think, I think that was ELP's job is to help Hikuleo. Like that's the pairing here, and I was down on that because I just felt like, oh man, that's what ELP's position is now, to just be there to help the guy that I feel like he's, in all intents and purposes is much better than. But he did the job to get Hikuleo to a point, and then he knew that, don't worry, at the end it's going to be me that you're all talking about. So I felt like they did a great job of it, just to continue the narrative of his job is to pump up Hikuleo's tires. Which is part of the role. So I felt he did a good job of that. And yeah, Hikuleo's a serviceable big man that can always be a valuable role in a New Japan landscape. And I think he's got a bit more credibility as a result of this tag league for sure, especially the last couple of matches.
Yeah, and I think, as far as building monsters, I feel like there's always some kind of monster in every season of New Japan. You had Bad Luck Fale recently, Lance Archer. You have these big monsters that you want to be able to throw in like a New Japan Cup that could beat an Okada or Tanahashi like figure, and can be a credible threat. And I think they have to reload, and you need to create a new kind of monster role. And so I think that with Hikuleo, I think they're trying to build him up, and yeah, that's why they gave him the Jay White win. He got out the A block. He's won titles. I think that they're really trying to gear him up. So yeah, eventually, yeah, you can do Hikuleo versus Umino, and it's this big deal. Like, all right, Hikuleo's this monster. Umino's the hero we want to win. Can Umino slay the monster?
The only challenge is the babyface monster is a tough angle to take. So it'd be interesting to see how they pivot and those layers of, as you mentioned before, Jeremy, those layers of character need to come in for him to be able to not be stuck as the big friendly giant.
Mm-hmm. Wasn't hard for Andre.
Les Commission also asks, with Bishamon winning the tournament for a third straight year, are they one of the best tag teams alongside Dangerous Tekkers from the last 3 years?
Yeah, easily.
Yeah, I think, we started in 2017. When you look at the landscape there, I mean, it was War Raiders, or War Machine, and like Archer
and Archer and Smith.
Yeah, and that was it. Those three teams facing each other over and over and over again. Yeah, so I think Bishamon has been a breath of fresh air throughout this.
That's not true. Tenkoji were around.
Yeah.
I think they even had a title run that year.
I think they did, yeah.
For like a month.
I would say this Bishamon team feels like the most of an actual tag team. Like that, so much of New Japan's tag division in the past has been two guys. We want to either elevate one of them, we want to elevate someone from this group, or we just want to put them on the back burner for a bit. Bishamon feel like a concerted tag team. And I think that gives them the edge over a lot of the other, good teams of the past. Even the Dangerous Techers, there was always the view when talking about them was who's breaking out. Will Zach break out from this and become whatever? Or look how well Taichi's elevated. I mean, yes, that is true of Yoshihashi in the past. Always come up to a level, stunning. But now it's more like they're just a team and you expect them to be a tag team. So I feel like for that reason, they are, they're the most, when I think of New Japan tag teams, like Bishamon's looking like, yep, that's them,
Mm-hmm.
You know how some teams save their Shawn Michaels WrestleMania 12 gear for the big title win? Not Bishamon, bro. They're like, we're gonna do it the entire tour, every fucking night.
We paid a lot of money for this gear. We're gonna wear it every night.
Every night.
Yeah, Yoshihashi's like, I got new gear for the first time in 7 years. It doesn't have "Get Back Up" written on it, so I'm just gonna wear it as much as I can.
Also, I don't know why, but he's got a logo on his kneecap that literally looks like the new school Reebok like logo, and I don't know if he's allowed to use that shape on, but he does it anyway, so whatever.
Similar question here from Mike Gamble. It says Bishamon win their third consecutive World Tag League and also won the tag team titles from FTR at Wrestle Kingdom earlier this year. Are we looking at the best tag team in the world right now?
I mean, in some ways, yes. In some ways, I would probably say no.
I mean, it depends on what you're looking for. I mean, fundamentally, right. I can acknowledge that I don't watch much outside of New Japan, so I can't give you an accurate assessment on them outside of that. But yeah, if you're looking in a kayfabe sense, they're certainly very accomplished. But I know that, it's like anything. Like, what are you watching for? How do you assess that? I don't know. If in a kayfabe sense, if you believe that New Japan Tag Division has any merit, then they deserve the place. And you can argue in that context, but I mean, I don't know how you define that, to be fair.
What Stiff Josh said.
Yeah, everybody's going to have their own criteria, but I will say I do think Bishamon is one of the underrated tag teams. When people talk about tag team of the year, of course, you're going to talk about Young Bucks and FTR and Aussie Open, but I do feel like Bishamon gets overlooked because it's Goto and Yoshihashi, but again, like I did, when you look back at their resume, it's like, man, they have all these bangers. They're on all these top spots. They're over. They're a really great tag team. Last question here from Will Pro Wrestling. Do you guys think World Tag League was a success from showcasing the younger talent?
I do personally, but I understand that people want more from the young talent. They want everyone to come back and get high-profile spots. I felt like there was enough story progression for each of those key characters. I mean, Ren got a significant boost. I think most of the layers that we want to add to a character if we're playing a long game, I felt like they showed their hand at who they care about. Like, for instance, Gabe Kidd was in far more consequential stuff this year than even he was in say, the G1. The G1 felt like he was just doing his own thing. It felt like this tournament, they were like, we're going to use Gabe Kidd in relation to Shota. We're going to use Gabe Kidd in relation to Kaido. We're going to use what his character is to help, tell a story in relation to other characters, which feels like, that's all I'm looking for is just level of investment that's growing on stuff. But if you're like, I want Shota Umino semi-main event Wrestle Kingdom, which a lot of people want. I understand it's been the pandemic era. It slowed things, and people want fresh, new now. It just depends on what your expectations were. But for me, I felt like this was a tour that wasn't headlined by a lot of established names, and I felt like it was somewhat successful in showcasing. There was a main event. With the Shota Umino Ren Narita Noah main event during the tour. Like that was an evidence of young guys go out there and put on a New Japan main event, and they invested in them, and I thought it was awesome. And I think that's a good sign. It shows that there's some level of care towards the young guys and trust that they can actually deliver in those spots. So I felt, all in all, but expectation depends on your expectations, like most things.
Yeah, I thought that they definitely. I mean, this tour from a fan perspective was definitely a success. Very easy to watch. Lots of good stories, introduced new characters, built up feuds. There was a lot of great things that were happening here, and the quality of the tour overall was markedly higher than it has been in recent times. But at the same time, when you look at the venues that they were playing, it was mostly smaller gymnasiums in the 800. I mean, if we're being generous, 500 to like 1,200 range, basically, in smaller towns all around Japan, and they really put a lot of nights in a very, very, I think it was like 16 nights in 20 days. So, I mean, keeping up with this was just so taxing. It was almost impossible to do it. And one has to wonder how many people were like us watching all of it, how much, chatter has there been coming out of this about, I mean, some of the bigger angles definitely got some attention, but I don't know how many people were actually watching these shows, checking them out, and invested in what was happening. Nonetheless, I do think that it was success in a lot of different ways. I'm not sure how that will translate from a commercial standpoint long term.
Yeah. Overall, I thought it was a really fun tournament, and I thought that it did do a great job of establishing newer tag teams. Like we talked about earlier, Monster Sauce, I thought got over really well. The War Dogs, I think the War Dogs were, like the stars of the A block to me. So there was a lot of tag teams that they threw out there that were new. Yeah, that they didn't get to the semifinals or finals, some of the teams, but overall, yeah, I thought that World Tag League made it look like, all right, New Japan's actually going to have a focus on tag wrestling going forward, and they want to establish more teams that have more than just, your normal, 3 or 4 teams challenging each other every year. All right, so that's going to wrap up our World Tag League coverage. Like we already mentioned, we got the tag title match at the Dome, double championships, Bishamon versus GOD rematch. We're going to push some of these questions to next week. We did get the Road to Tokyo Dome lineups, and we will preview those shows next week as they're Thursday, December 21st and the 22nd. And then we'll just get through these last news items here and wrap the show up.
Nice. So the promotion revealed in a press conference Monday that the 3-way title match between Jon Moxley, Will Ospreay, and David Finlay, set for Wrestle Kingdom, is going to be contested over the newly minted inaugural IWGP Global Heavyweight Champion. And the comments by Chairman Naoki Sugabayashi basically summarized that in the past, we had the U.S. title that was changed over to the U.K. title, and a lot of the expansion of New Japan over the past, probably half decade really focused on moving into the Western markets. But moving forward, they're not just going to be expanding in those markets. They're looking to also move into different parts of Asia as well as Oceania. And because of that, they don't want to have a title that just represents one nation. They want to have one that encompasses all of them. Thus, the global title has been coined and minted. And so we will have a new global championship. I don't know how a global title is any different than a world, because my understanding was that when I looked at a globe, it was a map of the world, which we already have a world title. But apparently a global title is not a world title. It's different.
Well, yeah, it depends on if you ask Flip Gordon.
Oh man, the first thing I thought when I saw that we were gonna have a global championship, I was like, is this just the global honored crown? This is the GHC title? Like, what are we doing?
Yeah. Obviously the memes started quickly. People's instant reaction. I mean, yeah, you look synonym for world, you'll find global. But to be fair, you put a synonym for world, you'll also find intercontinental. So, yeah. I mean, we're talking semantics here. I get it. It's an easy push to be like, oh, what a ridiculous concept. I know Charlton's doing his best to rationalize that the world championship, you come to Japan to battle for the world title. The global championship goes out into the world to battle the best. Yeah, I think as you mentioned, young boy, that's kind of the thing, bullshit. Isn't it? It's like
that's not what happens. The world the NWA World's Heavyweight Champion went around the world defending the world title. What are we talking about?
Yeah,
did I not watch Sonata wrestle Jungle Boy? Did that not happen?
Yeah, exactly. I get the rationale. I think it's one of those ones where they're going to be doing their best to try to cake this in some kind of logic. But it's at the end of the day, I agree with the idea of the US belt, what it once was, like the idea of what it was, signifying that expansion into the West. But for someone that's in Australia, it's like bringing something of significance down here. Anything of significance down here would be ideal. So where there is hope for this market that, the West isn't just the US, it's obviously the UK. There's a bigger world out there that can engage with New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I feel like this is just an admission of we kind of want something for this role. If it devolves into just the AEW title, I obviously won't be happy. But I hope that it stands as something potentially that, can be a belt that certain guys that will be really good to sort of platform, like a Zack Sabre Jr., for instance, is someone you can platform to the world and get him out into those spaces like he has done with the TV title, but with a belt of, some level of prominence. I don't really get it stuck into the semantics of the belt, and it is what it is. GHC though is it is quite hilarious. Let's be honest. It's funny.
It's their low key game plan to buy Noah, and eventually they're gonna get all the GHC titles, just like AEW's taking New Japan titles. New Japan's gonna take Noah titles and start murdering
pro wrestling, a history of punching down.
But I think the one thing with this title, the one thing that Will Ospreay proved this year is that, if you are a star and go around the world, have great matches, people are going to see you as the real world champion. And so I think the man a lot of times makes a title. So we'll see who ends up being the first champion and seeing the pace they set for the title next year.
This shit's not traveling around the world. They might start it out that way, a show here or there, but this is going to be the All Atlantic. It's just going to eventually just be on the show. It's just going to be the Intercontinental title. That's all it is.
And that's it. I'll take it. I will take that. That's preferable to me. If we could do that as the second belt, let's do that. And just pretend like we're going to be expanding in those spaces and just actually retract.
Global so stupid. Anyways, Noah the New Year 2024. They announced a couple matches for the January 2nd Noah show involving New Japan talent. So Kiyomiya and Oiwa will be teaming up to take on Evil and Yujiro of the House of Torture. Tomohiro Ishii has answered the challenge to Masa Kitamiya. They'll be facing off in one-on-one action. Go Shiozaki will be facing off with Satoshi Kojima, Strongest Arm, Strongest Lariat, Bread Club for Life. And finally, Zack Sabre Jr. and Yoshinari Ogawa team up to face off against Hiroshi Tanahashi and Hayata. Repro Uprising 2023 is this Saturday, and we have a rematch between Tomohiro Ishii and Luke Jacobs. Zack Sabre Jr. will be facing off against JJ Gale, and then in the main event, Will Ospreay versus Gabe Kidd, which is going to be awesome.
Yeah.
Will Ospreay versus Josh Alexander 2 goes down at TNA Snake Eyes on January 14th at the Palms in Las Vegas. Also announced for that show is the return of one Kazuchika Okada to TNA as he teams up with longtime friends, the Motor City Machine Guns, to take on Eddie Edwards, Moose, and Brian Myers at Snake Eyes. And finally, Mascara Dorada and Rocky Romero 3 will be taking place this Friday at Arena Mexico. So a lot of excursion matchups taking place already in this portion of the calendar year.
Yeah. Well, that's going to wrap up the news. Going to push some of these questions to next week. Stiff Josh.
Good. I'm too tired.
Just blame me. Trust me. People are used to me going long, so just blame me. I'm happy to take it.
Stiff Josh, thanks so much for joining us this week. Tell our listeners, those who don't know, where they can find you online and what your podcast is all about.
Okay, yeah. Well, you can find me on Twitter or X at WeWorkStiff. That's at WeWorkStiff on Twitter. I'm pretty much always there, getting into random subtweet arguments, trying to fight the good fight. And I obviously represent WeWorkStiff, the podcast that myself and my co-host Dave run. We are a New Japan Pro Wrestling character and storytelling podcast. It's just not, if that's not evident from what I've talked about here today. You can find our show at thestiff.club or weworkstiff.com. You can find our little join up as a member of the Stiffies if you're so inclined. Buy some merch if you're so inclined. support our little independent endeavor. Again, thank you so much to you fellas for inviting me on. I very much appreciate it. Pushing to be much later in your time. I'm very humbled by the invitation, and I hope that the listeners out there, got something out of this crossover event.
Yeah, definitely. I think it definitely was great stuff. We'll definitely have to have you back on, and yeah, we'd love to be on We Work Stiff one day if you'd have us. So yeah, definitely.
Oh yeah,
great stuff.
100%. We've got something big coming, so I'll send you an invite for that. We'd love to cross pollinate. I think it's only good for the discourse that there is no tribalism here in this space. I know it's hard for pro wrestling discourse to accept that notion, but yeah, amongst us, it's all about growing our understanding. I really do appreciate getting the opportunity to hear in person. It's kind of, it allows me to not just talk to the wall when I'm listening to you guys. So I very much appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, next week we'll be back to do our awards preview show. We finally got all our awards and nominees narrowed down. I got everything on the ballot. I got the Discord daddy double checking to make sure everything's spelled right and formatted correctly on the ballot.
I didn't even know what we were doing next week. I had no clue that that's what's happening.
Yeah, we're doing the award preview show. The ballot will drop this week. You get your vote on there. So we'll be doing that next week. That means we're so close to Wrestle Kingdom coming soon. So that'll be next week. So if you enjoyed today's show, please consider making a donation and visit socialsuplex.com/donate and click on the donate button under the Keeping It Strong Style logo. Make sure you connect with us on social media. On X, the show is at KI Strong Style. You can follow the network at Social Suplex. Follow me at Jeremy L. Donovan on Facebook, facebook.com/Social Suplex. Also find us in the Wrestling Squared Circle Facebook group, Instagram at Social Suplex, on Reddit. I am the Pro Black Guy. Josh is Keeping a Strong Style. You can email me, Jeremy at socialsuplex.com. And make sure you check out all the other shows that we have here on the Social Suplex Podcast Network. One Nation Radio, hosted by Rich Latta and James Boyd. All Things Elite with Floyd Johnson Jr. and Austin Sumowitz. Imp's WWE Adventure with The Implications, Matthew Mayer. And Wrestling Art with Chris Things. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a rating and review. And we will catch you next week on Keeping It Strong Style, the ace of podcasts.
Itchy. Bye.
Thank you for listening to Keepin' It Strong Style. We'll see you next time.